Someone's voice woke up Blair. He slowly opened his eyes and everyone around him immediately burst into laughter. One of the students asked how such a stupid idiot was still studying here. Blair got scolded again. Blair scratched his head and thought, "Where am I? Is this a dream?" The girl sitting next to him whispered that teacher Britney was calling him again. Blair turned around and saw his teacher behind him. She leaned over and asked displeased, "Did you sleep so soundly that you already forgot where you were?" Blair looked at her and thought, "Is this the teacher?" His teacher pulled his ear and said she knew that she couldn't sleep in her lessons. He must know how necessary mathematics is. She picked him up and told him to go answer. Blair walked up to the board and thought that he seemed to be faced with a very difficult problem. The problem on the board consisted only of single numbers that needed to be added. The teacher noticed that Blair was standing still and told him to solve this task at home. Tomorrow before class he would show it to her. This will be his punishment for sleeping in class. The children laughed and said that this idiot would not be able to solve this problem in 3 days. Mathematics is one of the most important sciences. Such an idiot cannot have the ability to do it. Blair smiled and started writing something and his teacher thought, "Is he so confident like a scientist rich in knowledge?" Blair wrote back and the teacher thought it was impossible. Blair turned to the teacher and asked if he could go to the toilet. She allowed it and the children asked in surprise, was he able to solve the problem? He clearly wrote a random number. The teacher disagreed with the students and said that the answer was absolutely correct. Blair left the class and surprised exclamations began to sound behind him. Someone exclaimed, "How can this be? Even the teacher took several hours to solve this problem." Blair thought that this wasn't even an arithmetic progression problem. He moved. Chen Luo is an ordinary mathematics teacher who has completely devoted himself to this science. After graduating from university, he worked tirelessly as a teacher for many years. Next year he plans to receive a higher academic title, and at such a key moment he moved. He only took a nap during the exam, so why did he move to another world? It's not scientific. They don't live in a comic book. Maybe Newton can help him. He moved into the body of a student named Blair, but he is a complete zero in mathematics. The whole class calls him a fool based on the situation that just happened. In this world, mathematics is highly respected as a science, but their level of knowledge is quite low. Even a student from elementary school can easily find the answer to such a problem, but in this world, everyone can only add numbers one at a time. Since he can't solve the displacement problem, then he will become the best mathematician in this world. Chen Luo will rise to the height of science even in another world. Suddenly, a girl came out from around the corner and they ran into each other. They both fell to the floor, and Blair apologized to her, but suddenly he saw that he was hovering over her, and she looked at him indignantly. Blair quickly pulled back, gave her a helping hand, then looked away and said that he didn't mean for this to happen. The girl suddenly jumped to her feet and said that it was him again. Blair pointed a finger at himself in surprise and asked, "Do you know me?" She shouted that of course she knew him. It was he who pushed her at the entrance ceremony. Because of him she ended up in this position. He embarrassed her in front of the school. She remembered his face forever, but this time he specifically ambushed her. Blair looked away and thought, does he seem to be in trouble? What's happening? But wasn't she the one who crashed into him? He replied that he was not guarding her at all. Besides, wasn't she the one who bumped into him? She told him to stop. Then she started making some movements with her fingers and spoke to the element of fire, telling him to listen to her order. Nothing happened. Then Blair exhaled and said that she was so naive. He started waving his hands and asked, does she think she has magic? Let her look at him, ancient god of darkness. He started fooling around, and then the girl's spell worked and fire appeared in her hand. Blair stopped, and then the girl attacked him, telling him to get it. Blair thought, how could he forget? Isn't magic a prerequisite for moving to another world? He just moved to another world, and they are already throwing fireballs at him. What should he do? He asked her to wait, and the girl said that he was shameless. Let him receive punishment. Blair thought this meant he had to adapt quickly. He bowed sharply to her, and said that he was very rude. He asked her to accept his deepest apologies. He thought that a real man can always adapt. The girl stopped abruptly and chuckled questioningly. Then the fire in her hand disappeared, and she said that he should not think that he could apologize, and that's all. Suddenly she saw that there was no trace of him, and said that he ran away so quickly. Meanwhile, Blair was running around the school grounds thinking, what is wrong with this world? Do science and magic exist together? Suddenly he felt something and thought, what is it? His head was pounding in pain. He sat down on the ground, and then memories appeared in his head. Blair wept bitterly and called for help. His father and the people who came to their house reported that the general had given his life for his homeland. The man handed Blair's mother a box and told her to calm her sadness after the death of his father. Blair and his mother moved into a modest house. The people who lived there turned to them and gossiped. One woman told her friend that they said she was from an aristocratic family. Her friend asked, "What kind of aristocracy is here?" After the death of their husband, they became so poor that they had to work. Years passed. One joyful day, Blair came up to his mother and said that he had been accepted into the Shona Academy. She said that he must study well at the academy. Blair responded by telling her not to worry. He was already an adult. His mother imagined how he would grow up and thought that he was already so old. Some days, Blair spent time in the library. The old man who worked there told him not to dig around for too long, otherwise he wouldn't let him sleep there. Blair began reading books with the thought that he would definitely return their family to its former honor. At the academy, he tried to cast a spell, but nothing worked for him. His classmates began to say that he was trying so hard but could not make a single fireball. He had no talent for magic at all. He couldn't even master the fireball technique. He may be from a noble family, but he was so poor that his family wouldn't even hire him as a servant. Such a mediocre student would soon be expelled from the academy. He's also a complete idiot in mathematics. He probably didn't have a teacher in his childhood. If it weren't for the glory left by his dead father, both of them wouldn't even take him here. Let them just look at his black hair and brown eyes. He is definitely not pure blood. All the memories came flooding back to Blair at once, and at the end he heard his own words. He apologized to his parents and said that he knew nothing about mathematics or magic. He was worthless. He returned from his memories and his classmate asked what was wrong with him. Blair opened his eyes and thought, "I call her Jasmine. She is from my class. How did she find me?" Jasmine smiled and said that there was a lesson on magic theory downstairs. He was okay. She held out her hand, and Blair replied that he was fine. He thought that he didn't think anyone would worry about him. He accepted her help and thanked her. He thought that now he understood what happened to Blair, but now he had him. After that, they went to class. The teacher said that as everyone knows, there are 4 magical elements in the world, and all magic is based on them. Blair thought that in this world, people are divided into natural-born magicians and ordinary people. Both magic and science are very important. This academy is a famous magic academy. The teacher raised her hand up and said that in this world, magic is based on 4 elements: earth, fire, wind and water. They are the 4 main elements. Mages use spells and hand gestures as well as spiritual power to manipulate the elements. This is how magic happens, but to use magic you need natural ability. After a while, the bell rang, and the students were glad that classes were finally over. Another student said that all these old people can do is lecture from textbooks. It's so boring. The teacher had already begun to collect his textbooks, but Blair approached him. The teacher asked if he had a question again. Blair said he wanted to ask, without natural abilities, is it really impossible to wield even a drop of magic? The teacher apologized and said that he had already asked this many times. The answer would not change. Without abilities, he cannot control magical elements. After that, other students began to laugh at him and said that their mediocre Blair was fantasizing again. He tries so hard in all his classes, but what's the point? If he doesn't have talent, it won't appear. Suddenly one boy put his hand on Blair's shoulder and said that it would be okay if he didn't graduate. By that time he would already be working on his father's estate. He pointed his finger at his classmate and said that he, Toby, would always share bread with him. Blair turned around and thought that he remembered this man. He is Blair's only friend, and he seems to treat him well. Toby smiled, then said goodbye to Blair. Jasmine remained in the classroom. Blair noticed her and asked if she wanted to say something. Jasmine replied that this is not true. Blair thought that she seemed very worried about him. Jasmine quickly ran to the exit of the class and said that teacher Britney told him to come to her office after class. He replied that he understood, he would go. He remained sitting in class and thought that she was so strange. He saw her several times today, but it was as if she always wanted to tell him something. Even though he has excellent knowledge in mathematics, without the ability for magic in the magical world, it is simply ridiculous for an ordinary person from birth. Maybe they should just try it. He began to cast a spell to summon fireballs, but nothing worked for him. He thought, what was I waiting for? He was already upset, but suddenly, flames began to appear around him. Then the fire became brighter and enveloped his hand. Blair looked in surprise at the flash of fire in his hand, and thought, is it a fireball? But this cannot be, because this body should not have any ability for magic.
He exhaled, and said,
This is so cool, fireball magic. He started playing with the fireball, and told it to go out and play. He raised a huge fireball above his head, and thought, it's a real fireball. Could it be that when he crossed space, magical channels opened in him? Suddenly he remembered that he needed to see the teacher and quickly went to her. He knocked on the door, and the teacher told him to come in. Blair opened the door, and asked for her forgiveness, but suddenly stopped short when he saw that his teacher was writing something on the table while standing. Blair called out to her. She smiled, and said that he had finally come.
Oops.
He looked at her figure, and she, sitting on a chair, told him not to pay attention. She always does calculations, while standing. He replied, that it was okay, but he was late. Why did she call him? Britney waved her hand towards the chair, and told him to sit down. She handed him a pen and paper, and asked him to solve this problem. Blair saw the problem again, in which all the numbers were added one at a time, and the teacher, heading to the exit from the office, said that she would leave for a while and let him decide. She told him to take his time. Blair named the answer, and the teacher was very surprised. She turned around and asked what he had said. Blair replied that the answer to this problem was 3,160. Britney quickly came up and touched Blair on the shoulder, asking how he did it. Even she took a very long time to solve this example. Had he really already solved it? But this couldn't be, because she had chosen the number 79 by chance. Blair asked, do you really want to know? Britney smiled, and asked, will you tell your teacher? I'm so curious. Blair responded with a glance to the side, and replied that he would tell her. She was happy, and he thought, is the teacher such a fool by nature? After that, he scattered all the papers on her desk, and said that he saw her process of solving problems. She performs calculations by adding numbers one at a time. This is not only a waste of time, but also an opportunity to make a mistake. He looked at her calculations, and said that she had calculated everything correctly, which was commendable. Britney said that this is the topic of the last lesson. In this world, the magic of mathematics is at a low level, but is this the only way to solve it? Britney replied that she was wrong. He took the first one, and said that this problem also has a second solution method. First you need to find a pattern. He began to write down the solutions on paper, and said that the first number in the last, the second number in the penultimate, and so on. Add them up, and you get 80. Let her say how many numbers add up to get 80. Britney suddenly raised her hand, and said that she understood. There are 39 of them. Blair said, that's right.
Yeah, great.
Let's sit down. He suddenly remembered that she was the teacher, and apologized to her, saying that it was a habit. Britney thought, did he tell me to sit down? It's a habit. Britney went on to explain further, saying that this changed the problem from difficult addition to easy multiplication. At the same time, they should not forget about the number without a pair. It is 40. Using this method, she would also be able to find a solution very quickly. Britney greatly admired his solution, and said that it turns out there is such a wonderful way. Moreover, it seems to her that this method can be improved further. Blair said, that's right. You're great. If in a block of numbers, starting from the second,
Each one differs by the same number as the previous one,
then they can be described by one simple formula. He wrote on paper a formula for summing an arithmetic progression, and his teacher was lost in thought. Blair waved his hand in front of her eyes and called out. He thought, elementary school math from my world is so difficult for this world. Britney asked if he came up with this method himself. Blair replied that it was something like that, it would be more convenient. He thought that she still wouldn't understand if he told her Gus's name. The teacher grabbed his hand and said he was a genius. If he continues to do this, he has a bright future ahead of him. She got too close to Blair, and he called out to her. After that, she quickly backed away from him, and said that she was just so excited.
She thought for a second,
and asked if he wanted to become an outstanding mathematician. Blair happily replied that he didn't want to. He wanted to become an outstanding magician. Britney tilted her head to the side, and looked at him, puzzled. Then she quickly clung to him, and grabbed his hand, saying that he was so gifted in mathematics.
This was the blessing of Manura.
He should not waste his talent. Besides, she knew that he had no ability for magic. By becoming a mathematician, he could also take a worthy position in society. In any case, he should choose mathematics, not magic. Blair threw her hand away from him, and said that he still wanted to become a magician. He thought that as soon as he introduced a couple of theories to this world, he would immediately become a great mathematician, and this is a fairly easy path. But he would only pass off other people's discoveries as his own, and transfer the fruits of great scientists
into this world.
The magic in this world attracted him much more than the glory of a mathematician. Britney asked, "Since you want to become a magician so much, can you make a bet?" Blair asked, "What bet?" She replied, that there would be the magic exam in a few days will finally decide whether he can stay at the academy. Blair got a little upset and said that if he didn't pass the exam, he would be expelled. Britney said that if he really wants to become a magician, then he must pass this exam. Blair looked up at her in surprise, and she, showing him the calendar, said that they would make a bet. If he passes the exam, she will no longer persuade him. If he doesn't pass, she'll help him apply for a teaching assistantship so he can stay, but he must give up magic and help her study mathematics. How's that for him? She mentally apologized to him and thought that he would definitely lose this argument due to his inability to do magic. Blair agreed, and after that, he left the office and thought that she was so stubborn.
She pestered him so much.
He remembered how she told him not to forget about their bet, and thought that he would rather do magic.
Suddenly a girl jumped out from around the corner again, and they collided.
Blair fell to the floor, and thought that this was such a familiar situation. He grabbed the girl, and thought about what it felt like. He suddenly opened his eyes, and saw what he was grabbing.
And the girl grabbed him by the clothes and said that he was shameless.
She started using fireball magic again, but at that moment, Blair had already managed to hide, and she shouted, "Where is he again? This shameless bastard got away." Blair thought that if he hadn't run like that, he would have been turned to ashes by now. After a while, in Britney's office, the same girl was sitting in her office, and the teacher, calling her Isella, asked what happened. She had been unhappy since she came in.
Isella replied that she met a pervert twice at the academy today.
Britney asked if they have any perverts, but any pervert would be unlucky if he ran into her.
Isella replied that next time she would definitely shoot a fireball at him.
The teacher laughed and said that this was all Isella. Isella threw a stack of papers on the table, and said that they would not talk about it.
If she had already solved this problem.
She only spent half an evening working on it, and she got it done quickly. She probably solves such problems even faster now. Britney looked at her solution to the problem, and said that she was great. She really solves faster than her, but Blair was able to complete the problem in just a minute.
Isella was surprised, and asked how he could decide so quickly.
This is impossible. Who is Blair anyway? She had never heard of such a thing. Britney smiled, and said that he really only needed a minute. She had never seen such a solution. Now she will show. She showed her a piece of paper with Blair's solution, and said that first she needed to figure out the pattern. The sum of these numbers, then they multiply the sum of the numbers by the logarithm. Here he simplified everything into a formula.
Isella looked at his decision, and then grabbed her head, and exclaimed,
"That means this is also possible, and this is the way this Blair came up with." The teacher confirmed her words, and said that she herself was very surprised that there was such a talented mathematician in their academy. Isella said she wanted to meet this Blair. The teacher saw her burning eyes, and agreed. After that, Isella opened the door to Blair's class with her feet and shouted, "Is there Blair in their group? She wants to meet him." Toby wanted to answer her something, but Blair pinched his leg, and hiding under the table, showed him a sign to be quiet. Toby awkwardly scratched the back of his head, and replied that Blair had just left on business. Isella asked, "Did he leave again?" She headed towards the exit of the class, and said that they should then tell him when she returns that she wants to talk to him. She has business with him. Toby agreed, and after that, the door to the classroom closed, and Blair crawled out from under the table. There was silence in the class, and everyone started throwing strange looks at Blair. Blair looked around and asked his friend why they were looking at him like that. Toby grabbed him by the shoulder, and told him to tell the truth about what happened to Isella. Blair asked, "Isella is this girl's name?" Toby asked if he was really interested in anything other than books and part-time work. Does he even know who this Isella is? Blair got scared, and even knew who this Isella is. Toby asked if he even knew how many fans Isella had. If they find out that he offended their goddess, they will not forgive him. Blair replied that this is the Shinden Academy. They cannot do whatever they want. Toby said that at least he knows what their academy is called. Then let him tell him where their campus is. Blair asked, "On Baker Avenue." Toby asked, "Where is this avenue?" Blair replied that he was in the city of Yabo. Toby sighed and said that he already thought that he was pretending to be a fool, but now he sees that he really is a fool. Isella's father is the mayor of Yabo. Blair was surprised and thought, what the hell, this is what he got himself into. He asked, if he finds her and apologizes, will she forgive him? One of his classmates heard this and asked,
Led he dare to get into conflict with Isella.
He looks like he doesn't want to stay at the academy. Blair turned around in fear, and the boy said that this was correct. Anyway, such mediocrity should not have lasted here for a couple of days. Blair thought that this guy's name was Bud. This idiot was always hurting Blair. Toby asked if he would art. Blair thought that what he said was true. Although in addition to magic, the academy studies mathematics, history,
philosophy, and more.
If he cannot become a magician, he can become a scientist and have the same respected position in society. However, in a royal-level academy, unlike the Shand NASA Academy, graduates must have at least some magical abilities. After all second-year students will have to pass. In fact, the magic exam is quite simple. Every student can pass it easily. But Blair is absolutely not endowed with the ability to use magic, so for him, this exam will mean the end of his studies at the academy. It's not surprising that the teacher decided to argue about passing the exam. Bud hit the table with his fist and exclaimed, is he even listening to him? He pointed his finger at Blair and said that he was an orphan mudblood. Toby rose from his seat and called out to Bud with displeasure. Then he asked if he wanted to fight. Bud asked why he cares. Toby replied that Blair is his friend, and his business is his business. If he wants to fight, he will show what he is capable of. Bud replied that he would remember that. Next time, they will answer him. Bud and his friends left, and Blair thought that although this fat man does not seem very reliable, at such a moment, he showed himself to be a loyal friend. He's a great friend.
He asked if Isella bothered him.
He would help him, right? Toby smiled and replied that of course, he would do it, but by then, he would give it to him. The smile on Blair's face disappeared. After that, time passed, and a few days later, the magic exam came. All the students gathered on the site, and the teacher said that in this exam, they will test their fireball technique. Students who fail the exam cannot continue their studies at the academy. Fireball is basic magic. He thinks every student can handle this task. They will need to stand behind a line and hit the target with a fireball. They'll start with Bud. Bud stepped forward and cast a fireball. The man extended his hand forward and sent the fireball at the target. The teacher praised him and said that he passed the exam. Linda has passed. Linda has passed. Let the next student come up. Bud looked at Blair and said that he should enjoy his last minutes at the academy. Toby got angry and told him to shut his mouth. The teacher said Toby is next. Toby stepped forward and extending his hand, began to cast a spell. A small ball of fire accumulated in his hands, and he aimed it at the target, but the fireball did not reach the target. And the teacher said that he passed. Toby was delighted, and the other students said that he had conjured such a small ball. He had tried hard. The teacher looked at the list and saw that Blair was next. Blair thought that he did not have the gift of magic. He would not pass the exam. He could not even create a fireball. Poor guy, he doesn't want to expose him to ridicule. He sighed, and said that the entire second year passed the exam. Then he declared their test over. Bud told him to wait. The teacher looked up at him, and Bud told Teacher Anthony that he had missed one student. He pointed his finger at Blair and said that he hadn't passed the exam yet. Blair remained silent, and the teacher asked if this is how he will pass. Bud asked if he is a student at the Magic Academy and will not take the magic exam. All Bud's friends laughed and said that this idiot would be expelled. Bud said that he can still return to the academy. Maybe he shouldn't lose face. A crowd gathered around Blair, and other students headed to the spectacle. Two girls ran past Teacher Britney and said that the idiot from the 5th group was about to disgrace himself. Toby put his hand on Blair's shoulder and told him to ignore it. They were just out to make fun of him. Blair pursed his lips and said he'll try. Teacher Britney came to a crowd of students, and one of them asked what he thought he was. He doesn't have the ability for magic at all, so why disgrace himself? Another student replied that he probably still had not come to terms with the fact that he was untalented. The teacher told them all to calm down. After that, he looked at Blair and said that he would ask again.
Does he really want to pass the exam? Blair confirmed his words, and said that he wanted to try it. The teacher nodded and said that whatever the result, he did well. Now he can begin. Blair stood in front of the target, thinking that although the spell and hand gestures were not needed, he would still do it for appearance sake. He began to cast a spell and gesture with his hands, and after that, the hot air scalded the students behind him, but the fireball did not appear. Bud took a closer look, and then laughed, and said that it was very strong. Blair finished the spell, and then a powerful fireball appeared in front of him. He shot it at the target. There was an explosion, and all the students were very surprised, including the teachers. The students continued to stand there, their mouths open in surprise. When the smoke cleared, they saw that the target was completely broken. After this, the examiner said that Blair passed the examiner, said that Blair passed the exam. Bud looked at the broken target, and said it was impossible. Toby was delighted, and patted Blair on the head, and asked if he had been hiding his talent all this time. After this, Teacher Anthony asked Blair to come to him. And Teacher Britney thought, how could he do this? Anthony's teacher took Blair to school, and asked if he had practiced every day from books, and in the end he was able to create a fireball. Blair confirmed his words, and Anthony said that magic is a gift from the gods to people. Even ancient magicians used gestures and spells to release their abilities, and those who were deprived of abilities were called abandoned gods. There are many such people, and he is one of them. But now, the gods have rewarded him with their gift. This happens very rarely. In addition, today in the exam, he showed excellent speed and put his hand on Blair's shoulder, and said that Blair had great potential as a wizard.
Blair thought that last time he was persuaded to take up mathematics, and now, magic. Blair thanked Anthony's teacher for his praise, and said that when he first came into this world, he became very interested in magic, but now he wanted to go back to his world. Anthony asked, "To his world? What are you talking about?" Blair suddenly realized what he had said and apologized, saying that he had just been reading books on magic and was talking nonsense. He thought to himself that he was such a fool for spilling the beans. Anthony said that Blair seemed to be putting in a lot of effort lately, and that other world he was talking about was apparently from the legends of the Holy Master. Blair thought, "Holy Master, this is probably the highest rank of magicians." Anthony's teacher said that according to legend, there was once a holy master who could control space, tear it apart, and go to another world. But these are just legends. They all know perfectly well that the gods created only their world, no other exists. Blair asked, "Space management, space gap, a trip to another world?" Blair grabbed the teacher by the shoulders and called out to him in surprise. Blair exclaimed that he should become a holy master. After the magic exam, the academy announced several days off, during which time Blair looked through almost all the books on magic in the library. Mages in this world are divided into 7 levels: low, medium, high, great magician, master, grand master, and sacred master. Sacred master is the highest level, spoken of in legends. Their magical abilities are described in ancient books, but currently there are no people left who have seen them. Many books indicate that the sacred masters possess the magic of space. They could tear space and move between worlds. Although many people think that there is no other world, and the magic of space is just a legend, since Blair was able to move, he thinks that the magic of space still exists. This is his only hope of returning to the real world. However, Teacher Anthony does not believe in the magic of space, so Blair will not receive any new information from him. The old librarian tapped his finger on the table and asked, "Does he read everything?" Blair thought it was the administrator who had come. The old man said that it was time for him to work. Idlers had nothing to do in their library. Blair awkwardly scratched the back of his head and said that he was on his way. Time passed, and morning came. Blair walked out of the library and thought he had licked everything clean. He didn't think it was so hard to work in the library. His lower back hurt, and his arms and legs were shaking. He opened the door and went into his class. After that, the students began to whisper. One of them said that Blair had the largest fireball in the test, even larger than Anthony's teacher had. Had he really been hiding his abilities all this time? Another girl said that she hadn't noticed before, but Blair was quite handsome. No wonder Isella came. Suddenly Blair noticed Isabella and thought, "What is she doing here?" Isabella sat in his place with her feet on the table. He immediately turned away, and mentally told her not to look at him. Isella jumped up and said that she didn't know he was the same Blair. Blair turned to her and told her to listen to him. It was just a misunderstanding. Isella called him a pervert and told him to shut up. After that her hand caught fire, and Blair asked if she was not going to do it right here. Isabella cast a spell, and Blair covered his hands, cursing. Then he opened his eyes and saw that Britney's teacher had grabbed Isabella's hand and prevented her from doing this. She asked why she was using magic in the audience. Isella told her to listen. It was all him. Britney raised her hand and told her to be quiet. She called out to Blair and said that she was just looking for him and wanted him to follow her into the office. Then she called out to Isabella and said that she would go too. Blair shrugged and thought, what should he do? He has no choice. After that they both left the classroom, and silence reigned between the students. Bud thought that Blair was just an idiot. What happened to him? Meanwhile, in Britney's office, Blair said that he accidentally bumped into Isella and really wanted to apologize.
He asked for her forgiveness.
Britney said that everything was cleared up and that she could trust him. He did it by accident. She called out to Isella and said that she should not argue. Isella replied that if Britney said so, then she would forgive him. Britney told Blair that she had seen him in the exam, and he had exceeded all her expectations. She won the argument and would no longer insist, but could he tell her how he did it? It was the first time she had seen someone who did not have the gift of magic suddenly acquired it. Blair replied that he was just lucky. By the way, he had a question for her about magic. Britney smiled and said that if he didn't want to talk, she wouldn't force him, but let him ask. She would help in any way she could. Blair asked, are spells and hand gestures required to release an element? Isella laughed and asked, what kind of stupid question is this? Even children know this. Of course, to call an element, you need a spell and gestures. Blair asked, is it like this for all magicians? Are there really no exceptions? The teacher replied, even strong magicians need spells and gestures, but the more they understand the element, the less time it takes them. Magic is a gift from the gods. The gods taught people to use gestures to summon an element, and thus magic was passed down from generation to generation. To summon an element without all this, one must have divine enlightenment. Isabella asked, why did you answer his stupid question so seriously? Blair looked at his hands, and wondered if because he was from another world, the gods of this world ignored him. Britney said, this is basic knowledge about magic. If you want to become a magician, then you should first study the theory well. She then said that she had called him today on important business. She handed him a piece of paper, and he asked what it was. Blair unfolded the paper, and Isella said, you didn't know that either. This is a scientific newsletter. All the most important scientific works are published here. But suddenly she was very surprised and asked, is the name of the teacher Britney? Britney said, I figured out the summoning method that Blair showed me, and I even wrote a paper on it. Since Blair put forward this method, his name should also be published. Blair thought that he did not need his name in the newspaper. It would be better if they paid him money. He worked in the library every day for pennies and didn't even always have enough for food. The teacher got up from the table and said that she almost forgot. She handed him a bag and said that this was a reward for publication. There were 50 pieces of silver. Let this be nothing compared to scientific fame, but let this money go to you, she said. Blair was delighted with the reward and thought that he had been dying of fatigue in the library for 2 pieces of silver a month, but here it was as much as 50. However, he stretched out his hand and asked if he could take it. This is half your merit, he said. Britney agreed and said that was true. Then she would take half for herself. She poured out half the coins for herself and said, these are your 25 pieces of silver. She thought that he was so kind, so she would not offend him. Blair got upset and thought, what the hell? He had just said that out of politeness, but she accepted it as the truth. She still sparkled all over with one phrase. He lost 25 pieces of silver. It was time for him to learn to watch his language. Suddenly an idea came to his mind, and he asked the teacher, for every article published in the newspaper, do you get 50 pieces of silver? She thought about it and replied that she hadn't even thought about it. But it must be true that each article published in a scientific journal costs 50 pieces of silver. Blair said he had some ideas. Recently I thought that the number of a set begins with the second term, and the ratio of each previous term is equal to a constant value. Maybe there is a formula for summing them up. Britney asked, is he talking about the Routh riddle? Blair asked again, what's Routh's riddle? She replied, The Ralph riddle was a mathematical problem put forward by the ancient sages. Ralph has 7 children, each child has 7 bags, each bag has 7 cats, and each cat has 7 kittens. Blair agreed and said, there aren't many numbers in this problem. If you add them up, you can get the answer, but if there were more numbers, then in this case, another solution method would be very helpful. Britney asked, are you saying you can solve Ralph's riddle using a different method? Blair replied that he had some ideas. The teacher was delighted and said that they needed to work on his method. Several hours passed. Isabella dozed off and woke up to the enthusiastic voice of the teacher, who shouted, this is incredible. He solved the riddle of Ralph with one formula. His math skills are second to none. Are you sure he doesn't want to do research with me? Isella put her hand on Blair's shoulder and said, I didn't know you were so good at math. Did you really come up with this on your own? Blair asked if she really wanted to know. Isella confirmed his words and told him not to lie to her. Blair pointed his finger at her and said that he didn't have any special talents. He just studied math when other people were asleep. Isabella asked in surprise, is this true? Thus Chanlua's geometric progression summation formula amazed the people, and his little plan went like clockwork. Sometime later, Isella walked along the corridor and thought that it seemed like what this pervert told her really made sense, but she didn't know why she had some strange feeling. Suddenly she noticed him and quickly hid around the corner thinking, isn't he in his second year? Why did he come to the third-year building? Did he really decide to help other students? She looked around the corner and thought that this time she would catch him red-handed. Suddenly she saw that he was missing and thought, where is he? Blair walked on the street and remembered Toby's words that there was a low stone fence behind the third-year building. There was no one there, so he could safely climb over. But he thought, he won't do anything bad, will he? If anything happens, don't let him say that he told him. Blair looked at the stone fence in front of him and thought that Toby must have been talking about this place. He climbed over the fence and thought about Anthony's teacher, who had recently said that if he wanted to learn more about magic, he should go to the Magic Association in Yabo City, where he could find more experienced teachers. Blair looked into the distance and seeing the city streets in front of him, thought it was interesting. Life was in full swing on the city street. Sellers were selling goods, and people were discussing things. Blair walked down the street and saw the Magic Association. He thought, it's so luxurious. Is this the Magic Association? He took out a mask from his pocket and put it on his face, thinking that he needed to be careful. He had better not reveal his identity. He walked into the Magic Association, where Jasmine greeted him at the reception desk. He explained everything to her, and she asked, so you want to find a magic consultant, right? Blair confirmed her words and thought, is this not Jasmine from my group? What is she doing here? Does she work here part-time? Jasmine did not recognize him, and said that the fee for consulting a high-level mentor would be 10 gold a month. An average-level mentor would cost 5 gold, and a low-level mentor would cost 2 gold. She asked him what he wanted. Blair stopped listening to her, and thought, why does he have to suffer so much? 1 gold piece costs 100 silver pieces, and he now has only 30. Blair headed toward the exit and apologized for disturbing her, but Jasmine stopped him and said that if he had problems with money, he could subscribe to their library. Blair asked about the library, and Jasmine confirmed his words, saying that the library of the Magic Association contains several tens of thousands of publications on magic. He could learn almost all the knowledge about magic from their books. It may not be comparable to consultations with a mentor, but it was absolutely free. Blair was delighted, and thought, can I have a subscription? Jasmine agreed and said that he needed to provide his ID. Blair did not answer, and she said that since he wanted a consultation, she thought he was already a magician. To make a subscription, he needed at least proof that he was studying magic. Blair was completely upset and thought it would be better for Isella to kill him. Then Jasmine said with a smile that it was quite easy to prove. For example, if he wanted to prove his abilities in fire elemental magic, then he needed to create a fireball in front of an expert. He asked, can this be done here? Jasmine confirmed his words, and then looked away, saying that she did not advise him to do this today. The expert was quite strict, and they said that his pass rate was only 10%. Already 300 magicians had failed his exam. Blair replied, it's okay. I want to do it today. He thought it would be difficult to climb over the fence again.
Jasmine took Blair into the office and told Mr. Andre that Mr. wanted to confirm his abilities. Blair looked at Andre and thought that he was wearing a red mage robe with 2 silver stripes. He was a mid-level magician of the fire element. Andre took a sip of tea from a mug and asked what his name was and why he was wearing a mask. Blair replied that his name was Chan Luo and he put on the mask because he received a burn while training in the fireball technique. The old man sitting next to Andre said, he burned his own face. Apparently, his fireballs are not easy. Andre said, your name is strange. Since you came to the exam at this age, you will probably become a low-level magician. Jasmine smiled and invited Mr. Andre to go to the exam room, but he did not agree. Jasmine left, but he said that they would not conduct the exam here and that he needed a deposit. He wanted to see Blair's fireball technique, and Blair was told to try to attack him. Blair asked, isn't there enough space here? The old man asked, do you really think you can hurt Andre with your little fireball? Since you say to attack, then let's see. Don't waste our time, Blair replied. If that's the case, then let them judge for themselves. He began to cast a spell and make gestures, and Andre watched him, commenting that his gestures were sharp but that he was casting the spell slowly. Blair extended his hand forward, and flames began to accumulate around him. Everyone was surprised, and Andre was scared. He told Blair to wait. Blair suddenly opened his eyes and finished casting the spell, forming a huge fireball. The fireball flew toward Andre, and there was a strong explosion. After a few seconds, the smoke began to clear, and Jasmine started to cough. The old man, who was at the center of the explosion, also coughed, because he protected Mr. Andre with his shield. Andre looked at the shield in front of him in fear, and the old man removed it. Then he touched Andre's shoulder, and Jasmine was horrified. Blair apologized, and said that he thought they were ready, so he hit with all his might. After this, Jasmine gave Blair a magician's ID, and a library card. Blair looked at the library card, and Jasmine said that he showed great fireball skill. She had never seen a fireball so powerful. Someday he would definitely become a great magician. Blair headed to the library, calling her by name. Blair thanked her, and said that they would see each other later. Said goodbye to him, and thought, how did he know my name? In the library, Blair saw other magicians, and thought that he didn't even imagine there would be so many people here. He sat down at a table, and began to read books, thinking that this was strange. Jasmine had correctly said that there were many more books here than in the academy, and the content was much more in-depth, especially about magical spiritual power. The level of magical spiritual power is the main criterion for determining the level of a magician. The higher the spiritual power, the more closely it is connected to the magical element, and the stronger the magic will be. Moreover, high-level mages with high spiritual power can even control the magic elements of lower-level mages. This leads to the fact that during a battle between mages, there is almost no way to overcome the difference in levels. However, the books about the 4 magical elements are written rather chaotically. After all, the level of education in this world is quite low. Mages in this world believe that the 4 elements are not only the basis of magic, but also the basis of the entire world. The remaining elements are combined into these 4 main elements in certain proportions. Of course, if he looks at all this from the point of view of modern science, their worldview is very primitive. Judging by the laws of physics, all matter consists of atoms. Atoms form molecules through covalent bonds, and through ionic bonds. They combine into ions, and form different chemical elements with different structures. Even high school students know that matter is made up of different elements, and the so-called 4 elements in the table of elements do not exist. But since there are magical elements in this world, he cannot find a scientific explanation for it. What if in this world, he can interact with magical elements? Suddenly he jumped up from his seat, startling the other library patrons. He thought that if he could interact with magical elements, he could create new magic. He took a library card, and ran out of the library, thinking that he would try this. Meanwhile, Andre and the old man were watching him. Jasmine brought 2 cups, and said that this was their coffee. Andre looked at Blair, and said that this Chan Luo had very low spiritual power, but he was able to create an unimaginably strong fireball. The old man said that what was even more strange was that Blair could not control the summoned element. Maybe he had something they couldn't understand. After a while, Blair returned to the academy, and climbed over the fence. He found himself in a clearing, and thought that there was no one here, so he would try it right here. He began to concentrate, and inhale thick smoke. He suddenly opened his eyes, and thought that he could feel and control the flow. Smoke began to emanate from his hand. He thought that he would try to direct the flow of smoke into the second element. A clot formed from his hand, and he thought it was oxygen. But is it really the element of pure oxygen? He couldn't determine it by eye. It continued to form in his hand, and he thought, this is it. He used the fire element and thought, what if it's really oxygen? But suddenly, the fire went out, and he said, apparently not. This is not what I imagined. What is this anyway? Some thin stream of smoke. But he didn't believe that he couldn't do it. He tried again, and magical energy began to gather around him. From this cycle, the glass and all the other fragile things in the academy began to crack. Britney, who was working at the time, felt energy fluctuations and looked at the cracked window, seeing an explosion behind it. Meanwhile, smoke began to rise in the forest, and Blair began to cough. Within seconds, the smoke began to clear, and Blair thought it was good that he had reacted quickly. But suddenly, he got a little scared when he saw a large depression in the ground. He thought that it was due to an explosion. Everything here was completely burnt. When flammable substances combine with air, they produce carbon dioxide, water, and sulfur dioxide, and the combustion releases the entire heating value of the fuel. It seems that this oxygen is even purer than he expected. Suddenly, Blair heard the voice of a student shouting, "What happened there?" Blair started to run away and thought that he didn't think there would be so much noise here. He needed to get out of here. The student called out to him, but Blair ran on and thought that he had made a little noise, but it seemed that he had created something worthwhile. The next day, he sat in class and dozed off, thinking that he would never study all night again. But suddenly, Toby put his hand on his back and asked if he knew what had happened at the academy last night. Blair replied that he had slept like a log last night. What happened? Toby said that last night, there was an explosion near the third-year building. All the windows were broken. The academy is investigating. He thinks it was some high-level magician. He didn't see what was there. But now a magician of no less than a high level definitely possesses such power. But why would a high-level magician do something like this at the academy? Blair replied that he didn't know. He had never even seen such magicians. Toby asked, how could you not see high-level magician? Isn't Britney's teacher a high-level magician? Blair was very surprised. After that, he knocked on the door of Britney's office, and she opened it for him. She said he was just in time. She needed him. She showed him the newspaper, and said that the Association of Mathematicians had already published an article about the ruse riddle. Since he proposed this solution method, his name was listed first among the authors. She congratulated him, saying that he had solved the most difficult problem in the world of mathematics. Blair said that he came to her on important business. She asked, is it important? Blair replied that she should let him do math with her. Britney was surprised and asked if he hadn't said that he wanted to become a magician. Blair answered that he did want to become a magician, but he also liked mathematics. He didn't want to regret it later. It even seemed to him that in a past life, he was an outstanding mathematician, as great as she was. She grabbed his hand and said that she was very glad to hear that. She hugged him to her chest and said that from now on, every day after school, they would do math. A volcanic eruption occurred in Blair's head, and he quickly pulled away from the enthusiastic teacher. She said that with his abilities, he just needed to strengthen them, and he would definitely become a great scientist. Blair asked if she would help him with questions about magic. Britney agreed, and Blair thanked her, saying that he was off. He then left her office, and Britney told him not to forget to come tomorrow. Blair said goodbye to her, but Britney told him to wait. She didn't say anything, and Blair called out to her questioningly. Britney thought about it, and after a short pause, said that she had thought about something. She decided that he wanted to study mathematics with her, not because of her help with magic. Blair realized that she understood everything, and she looked at him, waiting for an answer. At that moment, different thoughts began to flash through Blair's head. What should he do now? He would have to leave this world forever. She would rip his head off. He wanted to live a little longer. He opened his mouth, and after a second, asked, what are you saying? He just thought that, since they would spend so much time together, it would be more convenient for him to ask her about magic. She walked up to him, put her hand on his shoulder, and said that she was telling him he had a talent for mathematics, and he could use it as a tool. She led him to the exit of the office, and told him to go and rest, reminding him to come back after class. Blair left the office, and thought that this woman was both smart and stupid at the same time. The next evening, he came to Britney's office, and said that he had arrived. However, he stopped in the passage when he saw Isella inside. She looked at him with irritation, and asked why he came. Britney apologized to her, and said that she had forgotten to mention that from today, Blair would also be doing math with them, so she should take care of him. Isella turned away sharply, and Britney told Blair to sit down next to Isella. She had prepared a task for him. They threw one stone into the well, and after a while, they threw another stone, but twice as heavy as the previous one. The question was, when would the second stone catch up with the first? Isella said that to solve this problem, they would need to know the interval. Blair interrupted her, and replied that the first stone would never catch up with the second. Strictly speaking, if they didn't pay attention to air resistance, the large stone would never catch up with the small one. Isella was displeased, and said that he didn't even know such basic thing. Britney said that while she didn't know what he meant by air resistance, everyone knew that the speed at which a body falls is directly proportional to its mass. Isella said that the greater the mass, the faster the body falls. This was established by the ancient sages, and even children knew this. Blair listened to them and asked, if the sages said so, then, is it necessarily true? Have they ever seen it? Isella asked, did you dare to challenge ancient wisdom? Britney noticed that an argument was brewing between them, and Blair said that science should be accurate, and so should the approach to it. If the truth cannot be proven, then it is not the truth. Isella asked, then, since you want proof, can we make a bet? Blair replied that betting was an unacceptable activity for a student, and he would never agree to it. Britney told them to stop, but suddenly Isella interrupted her, and said that they were betting 10 gold. Blair jumped up from his chair and asked, why not? Britney's teacher will be our witness. Britney sighed tiredly, and after that, they came to the tower. Britney held stones in her hands, and said that one stone was twice the size of the other. She turned to Blair and told him to think again. After all, 10 gold was a decent amount. Blair replied that he had already thought about it. Isella asked if he really thought he would win. Blair remained silent, and Britney said that self-confidence was good, but he didn't need to be too smug. After that, she rose into the air with the help of the wind element. Blair was surprised and said, this is great. Isella said that it was a wind element flying technique. But of course, he didn't know anything about it. Britney climbed to the top of the tower, preparing to throw the stone. Isella grinned, and told Blair that he would lose. Blair extended both her arms forward, and threw the stone. The distant her arms forward, and threw the stones. They flew down at the same time, and fell at the same time. Isella looked at the stones in surprise, and Blair grinned. Britney went down to them and landed nearby. Seeing that the two stones were lying next to each other, she was very surprised and then exclaimed, how is this possible? Isella and Britney thought they had fallen at the same time. Britney looked at Blair and asked how he knew that the law of falling bodies was wrong. He replied that he had read this law in a textbook and checked it with 2 stones. That's how he realized that, in reality, the rules in the textbooks were different. Britney thought that truths which had been passed down for over 1,000 years could be disproven by just throwing 2. Cela justificante bentum. Differ prove. How many scientists didn't know that the simple truths they knew were not actually true? Why was Blair able to spot this so easily? She thought it wasn't all about luck. She said that he probably never realized how important those 2 stones were. She thought that, in the near future, a law under his name would appear in textbooks. Blair replied that there was still a lot of work to be done on the new law of falling. Besides, it wasn't only his merit. The 3 of them did it. Blair thought that, once again he got empty glory. He would play a little on emotions. Britney replied that it was entirely his fault. She just threw 2 stones. However, if he wanted, they could finalize this law together with Isella. Isella asked, with her. Blair replied that he would of course need Isella's help. Would she help him? Isella was surprised, and imagined them working together. She remained silent, then thought, does he need her help? She turned away from him and said that, since he said so, she would help. Blair thanked her, and Isella thought about how it would sound. The law of falling bodies. She pursed her lips at such thoughts and told Blair that if anyone offends him at the academy, he should let her know. She would help him. She thought that Blair wasn't so bad. He was very smart, and also handsome. Blair thanked her, and then extended his hand to her. She thought, what is he doing? Does he want to shake her hand? What was he up to? Why was she so upset? She asked, what are you doing? Blair replied that he was waiting for the 10 gold. He looked at her with a smile, and thought that he was rich.
Isella understood what he was thinking and thought that his head was full of only this. After that, she gave him 10 gold pieces and told him not to count them. There were exactly 10 gold pieces. Blair was delighted and thought that in one bet he won 10 gold. He became rich in one day. Isella called out to him and said that he seemed more interested in money than fame, but it seemed to her that he still did this not only for the sake of money. Blair thought about it and she asked, "What do you want?" Blair opened his mouth slightly but remained silent and decided not to answer. He remembered moments from his previous life and then closed his eyes a little. He asked, "What are you talking about?" "I just want to earn money and live better." He smiled and said that it was late. He would go and they would meet tomorrow. Isella was a little upset and watched him go. The next day Blair lay on his desk and thought that it was much more comfortable to sleep on this desk than in that cubicle. Well, at least now he had money. He must move on. Suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by a sharp crash from a hit on the table. He saw that Bud did it, and he said that Phage was looking for him, but he was still lying there. Blair asked, "Phage, who is this?" Bud pulled him towards him by his clothes with displeasure and asked if he had completely lost his fear. He thought that since he made a fireball now, he could do anything. Suddenly some guy came up to them and told Bud to let him go. Bud looked at the head man, Phage, and pursed his lips. Phage looked at Blair, and Blair looked at him and thought, "Is this Phage?" Phage approached him and asked if his name was Blair. He smiled and Blair said nothing. Then he looked at Bud and asked if he heard that he was told to let him go. Bud reluctantly let him go, and Blair asked the headman if something happened. Phage said that he should stay away from Miss Isella. People like him shouldn't communicate with her. He told his friends that they were leaving, and one of them asked if they would do anything to him. Phage collided with Toby, rubbed his shoulder displeasedly, and headed toward the exit from the audience. Toby approached Blair and asked if he was okay. What happened? Blair replied that it was nothing. Phage and Bud just wanted to talk to him. Toby asked, "What did Phage do to you?" Blair asked, "Who is this Phage? Is he afraid of him?" Toby replied, "This is the headman. Everyone at the academy is afraid of him. Only an eccentric like you, who always disappears behind books, cannot be afraid of him." Phage comes from the famous Howard family of the city of Yabo. He is the son of a viscount. Viscount Howard is an important person in the Society of Numbers. Many teachers at the academy are also members of this society. If you offended Phage, then I'm afraid you will have a hard time at the academy. He realized that Blair was fascinated by Isella's beauty, but he advised him not to neglect Phage's warning. Blair asked, "In what sense is he fascinated?" Time passed, and Blair came to the teacher's office and thought that, although the power of pure oxygen fireballs was enormous, he should first summon the ball and only then extract the oxygen element. Then the ball would not explode, and his main advantage would be that he would not need spells or hand gestures. But how is it possible to assign two different elements at the same time? Isabella called out to him and told him that he had better solve the problem that teacher Britney had given them. Tomorrow she would explain everything. After her words, Blair yawned and handed her a piece of paper with his solution. She was surprised and asked if he had already finished. She had only gotten through half of it. Blair replied that everything cannot be solved in one old way. It is necessary to find original solutions. Isabella looked at his solution and asked, "So it was possible to do it this way?" He sat closer to her and asked if she could summon two fireballs at the same time. She replied that she could do a few. "What? A few?" Blair asked in surprise. "Several? How so?" Isabella smiled contentedly and asked, "What? The brilliant Blair can only summon one at a time?" Blair scratched his head and replied that he had received many books on magic, but he had never found a way to summon more than one element at a time. Isabella replied, "Of course, because the books only contain the basics. There are no such artificial techniques in them." Her father had invited her to a high-ranking magic consultant who taught her how to summon several elements at the same time. But if someone called her sister, she would help him learn it. Blair easily called her sister, and the smile on Isabella's face began to disappear. She was embarrassed and asked, "What kind of facial expression is that?" She stood up and said, "Let's go. Follow me. I'll teach you." After that, they entered the clearing and Isabella began to summon fireballs. She summoned several fireballs at once and Blair was very surprised, saying, "There are actually several of them, also so stable." Isabella said that the main key to summoning multiple fireballs is the distribution of spiritual power. Many people think that spiritual force can only be directed to one place, but once he masters this technique, he will be able to distribute the power to different places. Every part of this force is capable capable of summoning an element. This way, they can summon several balls. Blair asked, is it possible to summon different elements using different parts of the force? She replied, that's a great question. In theory, it is possible, but in practice, it is difficult to do. It's like drawing a square with one hand and a circle with the other. Meanwhile, Bud was watching them and thought, are they really in a relationship? After that, he told Phage everything, and Phage broke the wall with his fingers out of anger and said that Blair would definitely pay for this. Meanwhile, Blair tried to cast a spell and thought, do I need to divide the spiritual power into 9 particles? He concentrated, and Isabella told him to remember that everything must be done as she said. He must share the spiritual power step by step, but if he didn't succeed, then let him not be upset. She, for example, trained for 6 months before she was able to consistently divide the power. After these words, another fireball flashed in Blair's hand, and Isabella was very surprised to see many fireballs around him. She asked in surprise, how could you do this? Blair replied that he did everything as she told him. He divided the spiritual power into 9 parts and summoned a fireball. Isabella replied, I wasn't talking about that. I'm asking how could you do this right now? Blair replied that he understood the technique and was able to do it. Wasn't that the case with you? She remained silent and thought, this pervert is already a genius in mathematics, and now he's a genius in magic too. Who said he was abandoned by the gods? He's clearly their favorite. She stamped her foot in displeasure and replied, of course it happened to me too. I figured it out faster. She ran away and said that she would not teach him. Let him now deal with magic himself and not ask her. Blair remained silent and thought, did I offend her again? Women are so strange. He put his hand in his pocket and felt something there. Meanwhile, Isabella was walking across the clearing and thought that he had pissed her off so much. Suddenly, Blair grabbed her hand. She turned around and asked what he needed. She looked down at his palm, in which there was a bracelet with a cat. Blair told her with a smile that what he was able to learn was entirely thanks to her lesson, so he asked her to accept his gratitude. Isabella looked at the bracelet with the cat and blushed. Then she said that he still had a conscience. She thought, this idiot isn't so stupid after all. She snatched the bracelet from his hands and ran further, saying that the bracelet was ugly anyway. But suddenly she fell and Blair told her to be careful. She rose to her feet and then turned to look at Blair. He wondered why she was staring at him like that. What should I do? Should I come over and feel sorry for her? Won't she yell at me? She ran further and said that it was all because of him. I won't leave it like that. Blair smiled awkwardly and wondered what he did wrong. After that, he lay down on the grass and looking at the sky thought, if she didn't like it, she wouldn't have taken it. I spent 50 silver. He wanted to give the bracelet to teacher Britney, but this was better. Suddenly, his view of the sky was blocked by Phage's friends, and Bud said that it seemed the elder Phage had warned him not to dare approach Isella. Blair got to his feet and then ran away. Phage's friends told him to stop. Blair thought that he didn't see the point in messing with these guys. Bud called out to Blair and asked if he would really run away from a battle like his dad until they killed him. These words stopped Blair. Bud laughed and asked if he had pressed on the sore spot. He attacked Blair and said that he had asked for it. Bud wanted to hit him, but at the last moment, Blair pulled back and Bud received a burn. Blair turned around and started casting fireballs. Bud cried out in pain, and Blair said that although he was not his father was a brave warrior who died for his homeland. He was a wonderful father, so don't dare insult him. Did he understand? Phage's other friends counted the number of balls Blair had conjured and said that there were 9 of them. How is this possible? They asked, then ran away. Bud asked, where are the 2 of you going? Blair came closer to him and Bud got scared. He told him not to come any closer. It was forbidden to fight in the academy. Blair asked, so you know about this rule, and still attacked me. Bud leaned against the wall and said Blair didn't need to do this. Blair continued to approach and said, you should have thought of that sooner. He wanted to direct all the fireballs at Bud, but suddenly he noticed someone behind him. Bud began screaming for help. He opened his eyes, full of tears, and saw Blair had fallen at his feet. He looked at him in surprise, pointed his finger at him, and thought, what happened to this guy? Bud started to run away, thinking it didn't matter to him. He'd better run. Blair was approached by teachers, and Britney told Bud to stop. Bud raised his hands and replied, I didn't do anything. Let them believe me. He fell himself. Britney pulled Blair up and asked, If you didn't do anything, then how did this happen to him? Don't think I don't know how you feel about Blair, Bud replied. It used to be like that, but now I didn't do anything. I'll explain everything. Suddenly, the old man told him to stop. Blair lies at your feet. Don't play the fool. Even now, you continue to damage the Academy's image. Go to my office now, and wait for me there. I will deal with you. Bud agreed, and the old man turned to the vice chairman of the Archie Society. It was all the fault of the management of their academy, he said. I apologize for this spectacle. Archie called the old man Calvin's deputy and replied that fights between young people in educational institutions were common, but to be honest, they should be stricter with them. What is Blair's current state? Britney noticed that Blair was weak and called out to him. Blair sighed and thought that he had gone to heaven. The heavens smiled on him. Britney started shaking him and asked what was wrong. Blair replied that everything was fine, until she almost strangled him. She hugged him and said it was good. Do you know how worried I was? Blair apologized to the teacher. Calvin coughed, drawing attention to himself, and told Blair that they would definitely deal with this matter, but they had come for a very important reason. Britney said that she forgot to introduce them. She pointed to the old man and said, "This is the vice chairman of the Calvin Society, you must know him. Next to him is the vice chairman of the Archie community. He is from the Mathematical Society." Blair greeted them, and Calvin said that he had helped teacher Britney solve Ralph's riddle, which was very promising. Britney said he got it mixed up. Blair solved this riddle himself. I only helped him write the article. Calvin said that by solving the Ralph riddle they would be nominated for the Edwin Prize. This is a great honor for the city of Yabo. If you wish, we will do our best to help you receive this award. Think carefully, the Edwin Prize is the most important award in the mathematical community. It would be a huge asset both for you and for the Academy. Britney thought about it and asked, Blair can't receive it. Calvin sighed and replied, he is still too young. In the Mathematical Society, no one has results like yours. If you say that he solved the riddle, then no one will believe it. Britney wanted to object, but Blair called out to her and took her hand approvingly. Britney looked at him and Calvin said that she could discuss it with Blair again. When they decide, let them tell him. The society will respect their decision in any case. Britney agreed. After that, they left, and she and Blair returned to the academy. They walked down the corridor together and Britney told Blair, although the solution to the Ralph riddle didn't seem unusual, it was a great breakthrough in the history of mathematics. It belongs to you, so a stranger shouldn't receive the reward in your place. Blair remained silent, and then said, you don't know, but this award shouldn't be mine at all. He turned around and said with a smile, besides, you're not a stranger at all. Britney was surprised and asked, what did you say? He wanted to answer something, but Britney said that it was too late. She told him to return soon, as she still had things to do, so she would leave. Blair remained silent, and thought, did I say something wrong again? He walked further through the corridors and saw a crowd gathered around the notice board. They were looking at an article and wondering if there was some new news. Who is Blair? Does he also write articles? One of the students asked. Another student said that Blair again published an article with the teacher. Seems to be about some kind of mystery. Her friend replied, it's Ralph's riddle. I heard that many scientists couldn't solve it for centuries. Is Blair really that smart? Surely the teacher helped him. Blair walked past them, covering his face. One of the students commented, this Blair must have found a way to suck up to the teacher. Blair thought he hadn't expected teacher Britney to publish the article under both their names. He sighed tiredly, then suddenly heard someone calling someone an idiot. He noticed Calvin around the corner and a man shouting asking if someone had fought again at the academy. The man was Bud's father. He scolded his son and asked, did I send you to the academy to start fights here? Do you like fighting? He raised a stick and shouted, then today, I'll beat it out of you. He hit his son with the stick and told Dean Calvin that he would definitely teach him a lesson. Just don't expel him. Calvin apologized and said that Bud's behavior was unacceptable. This is a serious violation of school rules. We will have to expel him. Upon hearing this, Bud's father fell to his knees and pleaded with Calvin not to do it. The dean asked what he was doing. Bud's father started begging, and Bud told him to stop. Blair approached them and called out to Dean Calvin. The dean greeted him, and Blair asked what had happened to Bud. Bud gritted his teeth when he saw him. Dean Calvin replied that Bud had violated the academy's rules and that they had already decided to expel him. Don't worry, we will definitely take action. Suddenly, Bud's father pulled Blair's sleeve and asked, are you Blair? he begged him to forgive Bud. I will definitely teach him a lesson. It wasn't easy for us to get him into this academy. If he's expelled, his whole life will go downhill. Blair looked at Bud's father with pity, then sighed heavily. He told the dean that although he and Bud had problems, he asked him not to punish Bud too harshly. Bud was surprised and silence fell between them. The dean said that since Blair was asking on Bud's behalf, the academy could temporarily postpone the decision. He then looked at Bud and said, "If you do something like this again, the academy won't give you a second chance." Bud's father made his son bow and told him to quickly thank Blair and Dean Calvin. Bud thanked the dean and Blair, then bowed his head in apology. Dean Calvin said, "That's good. Now go to class." Bud and Blair went to class together. On the way, Bud asked, "Why did you do that?" Blair stopped at the auditorium door. After a short pause, he replied, "I didn't want to let your father down." Bud thought for a moment, and then thanked Blair again. Blair opened the door to the auditorium, but Bud spoke again, causing Blair to stop. Bud looked into the audience and told Blair, "Be careful with Phage. He won't just let you go." His uncle is the deputy director of the academy. After class, Blair went to the library and thought that today had been such a difficult day, and he still had to go to his part-time job. At the top of the stairs to the library, he met the administrator and called out to him. The administrator asked if he had accidentally offended someone. Blair asked what had happened. The administrator sighed and said that from today he could no longer work in the library, and he also couldn't live in the room. This is an order from the deputy director. After that, Blair went to Britney's office. She said that today she wanted to take him and Isella to a seminar at the Mathematical Society. "Do you have anything to do tomorrow?" He smiled awkwardly and apologized, saying he had been kicked out of the library, so he needed to find a new place to live. She said he should have told her right away. She had a spare room at home. Blair remained silent. She added that no one lived there, so he could move in with her. Blair asked, "Will we live together? Will this really be convenient?" Britney asked, "What's uncomfortable about it? If we live together, we can study mathematics anytime. If you have questions, you can ask, right?" Blair replied, "That sounds good." Britney smiled and said that after the ball he could move in. Blair remained silent. Then Isella burst into the office and asked the teacher why Blair was there. Britney replied that Blair was also going with them to the seminar. Besides, he had just lost his job at the library, and from today he would be living with her. Isella exclaimed, "How can you live with this pervert?" Britney replied that she had already told her many times Blair was not like that at all. Isella replied that she was worried about her. "This pervert is so cunning." Blair got upset and asked, "Why do they keep calling me that?" Britney dragged Isella to the exit and told her not to worry. "Let's go get changed. We need to go to the seminar. Quickly, otherwise we'll be late," Britney said. She looked at Blair and asked if he had any suitable clothes for the day. Today would be his first time participating in a scientific seminar, so it would be better for him to wear something more formal. Blair asked, "Is it official? Is a magic robe suitable?" Britney replied that if he had one it would do. In the evening they went to the scientific seminar where many guests had gathered. The teacher and her students were all dressed smartly. Blair looked at Isabella in her dress, and she said that they had arrived. Britney explained that this was the Howard family's estate and also the venue for the Mathematical Society's seminars. The Mathematical Society is a prominent organization in the Kingdom of Dionan, so they chose the Howard estate. Every seminar of the Mathematical Society is held there. Blair looked at the huge house and asked, "Is Howard a man from the Phage family?" Archie stood at the entrance to the estate discussing different solutions with his friends. Britney walked up to them and called out to Archie. He turned around and told Britney and Blair that they had already arrived. Blair greeted him, and Isabella, displeased, folded her arms across her chest and thought, when did he meet the deputy chairman of the Mathematical Society? Archie told Britney that he and his friends had just been talking about her. If she wanted, he could introduce her to them. Britney told Isella and Blair to go ahead. She would find them later. Blair and Isella went inside the estate, and Blair, looking at the table, thought, there are so many delicious things here. Rich people live completely differently. He tried the food and thought it was very tasty. He had never eaten anything like it. Isella grabbed his hand and asked, "Are you a pig?" Did Brittany's teacher bring you here just so you could fill your belly? You're only embarrassing us. Blair noticed something on the wall and asked what it was. He saw a drawing of bridges. Isella said that it was the pride of the Howard family, the 7 bridges of the royal capital. Blair asked again, the 7 bridges of the royal capital. Someone nearby asked, does he even know about this? Did he come to participate in the seminar? Phage stood nearby, leaning against the wall. He asked Blair, did you come to my house just to eat? I'll need to speak to my servants about hygiene. Clearly they'll let anyone in. Isella said that Blair came with them and asked how he could speak like that. Phage asked, did I say something wrong? He doesn't even know about the 7 bridges of the royal capital, but he ate more than anyone else. Isabella began to lead Blair away and told him to ignore Phage. They had to go. Phage got angry when he saw her holding Blair's hand and asked, what's wrong, Blair? Still hiding under her skirt? Blair turned around and said, 7 bridges of the royal capital? That sounds interesting. Maybe you could tell me about it? Isabella called out to Blair, but he said that he just wanted to hear about the 7 bridges. Maybe I can come up with a new method. Phage asked, a new method? Brittany's teacher simply felt sorry for you and added your name to the article. Do you really consider yourself a gifted mathematician? Isabella exclaimed. What do you know about it? It was Blair who came up with the solution to the ruse riddle, so his name was included. Phage replied, even if that's true, I'll see if he has any more new ideas. He turned to the other guests and said, look, Mr. Blair says he can solve the riddle of the 7 bridges of the royal capital. Isella looked at Phage irritably. One of the guests said, that's the young man who solved the ruse riddle with Brittany's teacher. Another guest said, the milk on his lips hasn't even dried. How can he solve this? Someone else added, Brittany took pity on him and included his name in the article. Now he thinks he can solve the 7 bridges of the royal capital. Brittany heard this, and Phage mockingly called Blair a math genius. Don't disappoint us, he said. Blair replied, I didn't say I was going to solve it. Suddenly Brittany grabbed Blair's hand. He asked, what is it? She whispered. Why are you getting into a quarrel with Phage? You don't know how powerful the Howard family is. If you anger them, you'll have problems not only with the mathematical society but also with the academy. Besides, mathematicians have struggled with the 7 bridges riddle for centuries. Don't disappoint us, he said. Blair replied, I didn't say I was going to solve it. Suddenly Brittany grabbed Blair's hand. He asked, what is it? She whispered. Why are you getting into a quarrel with Phage? You don't know how powerful the Howard family is. If you anger them, you'll have problems not only with the mathematical society but also with the academy. Besides, mathematicians have struggled with the 7 bridges riddle for centuries. Phage wants you to try it only to embarrass you in front of everyone. Phage called out to Brittany's teacher and asked, didn't you say Blair was a math genius? Why don't you believe in him now? Brittany told him not to twist her words, but Blair interrupted her and said, it's no big deal. I'll try it out of gratitude for the head man helping me leave my library position. Brittany and Isella were surprised. The teacher asked, do you really want to take this on? Blair turned to Phage and said, since you insist, I'll solve the 7 bridges of the royal capital. Phage replied, I didn't think you were that stupid. Let's see what you can do. The 7 bridges of the royal capital is a riddle that was invented by the first generation of the Howard family lived several hundred years ago. Since then, no one has been able to solve the riddle, except for that first generation. Several hundred years ago, the head man of their family was a high-ranking person. He noticed that the capital had a special terrain. At that time, the city was not yet very large. It was divided into 2 islands located in the middle of the river. To make it possible to move between the islands, 7 bridges were built. The islands were then connected to each other and to the banks of the river. These bridges helped the residents of the capital establish mutually beneficial relationships. One day, the elder was looking at the 7 bridges, and a thought occurred to him. Is it possible to use these bridges to travel to any place and return to the starting point by crossing each bridge only once? When the elder put forward this idea, mathematicians across the kingdom began to ponder the question. Many famous scientists came to the capital to find a solution. A lot of time passed. Scientists proposed many theories, but no one could figure out how to return without crossing at least one bridge again. Until, one day, the elder himself claimed to have found a solution. He announced it to all the mathematicians in the kingdom, and the next day, everyone gathered to witness the correctness of his method. Almost all the mathematicians of the kingdom assembled on the bridges. However, they waited until evening, but the elder never appeared. A few days later, his body was discovered. Most likely, he was so excited about his discovery that he accidentally tripped and drowned in the river. The death of the elder was a huge loss for the mathematical society of the kingdom. The 7 bridges of the royal capital were left without a known solution. Even the Howard family still does not know how to solve the problem. Several hundred years have passed. A huge number of mathematicians have tried to find the answer, but none have succeeded. Although the solution was lost, the Howard family preserved the memory of the first-generation elder, and the fact that he was the only one who supposedly found the solution. They hung this engraving in the living room. It is a symbol of pride for the entire mathematical community. Blair thought about what it meant. As he reflected, he realized the 7 bridges of the royal capital are the same as the 7 bridges of Königsberg. Blair replied that he would not be able to find a solution, but then no one else would be able to either. Farge chuckled, then laughed even harder. Is that your answer? Weren't you so sure of yourself? Some genius. The other guests who had been waiting for a solution to the riddle began to murmur. One girl said that he was just an arrogant child. Her friend, however, said that he didn't seem so simple to her. Farge wiped away tears from laughing, while Blair calmly said that he wouldn't find a solution because the riddle of the 7 bridges cannot be solved. Isabella and Britney asked at the same time, "Can this not be resolved?" Farge scoffed, "What nonsense is this? He can't solve it, so now he says it's impossible? Then how did the first-generation elder of the Howard family come up with a solution?" Blair replied, "Then let me ask, is there any proof that he actually found a solution?" Farge grew angry. "What are you trying to say? Are you doubting him? Do you even know the position the elder held in the kingdom?" Suddenly, the Viscount told them to stop. He turned to his son and said that he had told him many times not to boast about the glory of their ancestors. Farge was frightened and asked his father for forgiveness. The Viscount approached Blair and asked, "Are you Blair? Calvin spoke of you." Blair bowed and replied, "It is a great honor." The Viscount said he had seen the argument with his son and acknowledged that his son was in the wrong. He apologized on his behalf. However, he also added, saying that the 7 bridges of the royal capital have no solution dishonors the memory of our ancestors. I hope you take back your words. Blair replied respectfully, "I do not mean to offend, but the 7 bridges of the royal capital truly have no solution." Isella looked at Blair and thought that this was the first time she had seen him so confident. The Viscount began to grow angry. "Do you want to prove it?" Blair nodded. "I can prove it to everyone. I'll explain why the riddle of the royal capital has no solution." He began to draw something on paper. Faced with such a difficult problem, many wise men of the past sought a practical solution. That effort is worthy of respect. But if we examine the problem mathematically, the answer will be hard to find because there are too many possibilities far beyond human capacity. He finished his drawing and showed it to the guests. In fact, he said, "We can represent a complex practical problem on paper as a simple numerical one. Let each piece of land be a point. We'll represent the bridge connecting 2 sections as a line. This is the map we get." Then he added, "If we can leave from each point and walk across each bridge only once without repeating a pattern, then it will mean that the riddle has a solution." But, here the explanation would likely continue into the well-known graph theory problem that inspired Euler's solution. Can return to the original place without going over the 7 bridges again. A guest exclaimed, "Was it possible?" A girl, surprised, said, "That's amazing." Another girl turned to her friend and asked, "So it was possible to do this?" He simplified a practical problem into a drawing. "That's just an amazing idea." She wasn't wrong. "This Blair is really smart," she added. Her friend just smiled. Blair said, "It's obvious. Other than the initial and end point, when someone passes through a bridge onto a piece of land, they leave through another bridge. Now we will call points connected by an odd number of segments singularity points, and points connected by an even number of segments paired points." Britney said, "I get it. If they want to start from a point and eventually return to it, they need to reach all the points and also leave them. So the solution only exists if all the points are paired." Blair nodded. "Well said. That's the key point." One of the guests asked, Then the 4 points of the 7 bridges of the royal capital. Blair didn't let him finish. He confirmed, exactly. Everyone can now see that these 4 points near the 7 bridges of the royal capital are singular. Therefore, no matter what method they choose, they will never be able to return to their original point without crossing a bridge more than once. Therefore, the 7 bridges of the royal capital have no solution. All the guests froze in shock. After a moment, a man said, "This theory has no flaws, which means this problem truly has no solution." Fudge exclaimed, "What nonsense is he talking about?" The guests began murmuring among themselves in surprise. "So the Howard family has been deceiving us all these years. How is this possible? There's no solution to the problem. They've been lying for so long," Fage shouted. "Don't listen to this fool's nonsense." But the guests remained silent. A girl said, "I'm afraid that only their ancestor, the elder, was talking nonsense. He deceived the entire kingdom for so many years." Fage called out to his father, but he didn't respond. Then Fage turned around and was immediately slapped in the face. He fell to the floor from the blow. His father stood over him and said, "It's that lousy mouth of yours. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have been embarrassed like this." The Viscount turned to Blair and said, "I remember this. Just wait." But Blair stopped him. "Please wait." The Viscount turned back. Blair said, "According to the rules of the Mathematical Society, I helped with Fage's question. Now he must help with mine. Is that correct?" The Viscount looked at his son, then replied, "Very well. According to the Society's rules, let him ask his question." Blair said, "My question is very simple. If the sides of a square are equal to 1, what is the diagonal?" The Viscount was surprised. Britney asked, "Blair, don't you know that the Howard family put forward the Howard theorem?" The Viscount replied, "According to Howard's theorem, if the sides of a square are 1 unit each, then the square of the length of the diagonal is equal to 2. That is true." Blair shook his head and said, "You didn't answer my question. I didn't ask for the square of the diagonal. I asked for the diagonal itself." The Viscount clenched his teeth in anger. One of the guests said, "I never really thought about the diagonal itself." Another guest added, "He could probably show us that too." The Viscount fell silent. Blair thought, "Everything is as I expected." He had known about this number from the beginning. In his world, although scientists were respected, no one really knew them. People preferred gossip about celebrities over learning about the minds who contributed to the progress of mankind. But in this world, even though science is at a low level, scientists are highly revered. People respect knowledge more than magic. Scientists who have made major contributions to their fields enjoy not only international fame but also the respect of the royal family and aristocracy. That's why scientists have come together to take control of the economy and politics, forming a powerful force. The Mathematical Society is one such force. The Howard family holds an important position in the mathematical community. As such, the community's influence is significant. Even the head of Yabo City, Isabella's father, must show respect to the Howard family. The Mathematical Society includes scientists, politicians, and religious scholars. They believe that everything on Earth can be represented in the form of numbers. In fact, their ideas are similar to those of the Pythagorean school. The school of Pythagoras was this flaw was that they represented everything not as real numbers but as rounded numbers. Pythagoras believed that all values in the world could be expressed using ratios of whole numbers. However, Hippasus, a student of Pythagoras, was the first to discover otherwise. He realized that it was impossible to express the diagonal of a square as a ratio of 2 integers. This discovery shook the very foundations on which the entire school of Pythagoras was built. When the students realized that they could not solve the problem, they decided to deal with the one who had put it forward. In the end, they tied a large stone to Hippasus and threw him into the sea. But the truth could not be hidden for long. More and more people began to pay attention to the problem of Hippasus, and the school of Pythagoras was eventually destroyed. Numbers that could not be expressed using whole number ratios came to be called irrational numbers. From then on, people began to expand their knowledge of numbers, and mathematics grew into a broader field. Judging by the Viscount's expression, he had long known about the existence of irrational numbers. He wondered how people in this world treated Hippasus. The Viscount wiped away his cold sweat, and one of the guests said it was strange. Why couldn't she find this number? Another mathematician replied that it was impossible. There cannot be a quantity that cannot be expressed as a number. What is it? Britney asked Blair. What's wrong with this number? Can it be expressed in any form? Blair replied, this is a completely new kind of number, and there are many of them in this world. Someone had already discovered a similar number, but the discovery was hidden. Thanks to the help of Phage, this discovery will now become known to the people. Phage looked at his father and noticed that his hands were shaking with anger. He became frightened. Then Kirsten, glaring at Blair, shouted that it was all his fault. He lunged at him and shouted, die. He clenched his fist, ready to strike Blair. Blair prepared for the blow, but at the last moment a girl grabbed Phage's hand. He exclaimed, who is she? Let go of me. The girl apologized and said she had to stop him. Phage tried to break free, but couldn't. He thought, she seems to be a woman, but her grip is so strong. Suddenly his father's voice rang out behind him. The Viscount called out to him and asked, do you think you haven't done enough today? Phage turned around in fear, and the Viscount turned to his guests and apologized for the trouble his son had caused. It's my fault. I'll be stricter with him in the future. As for the number Blair had mentioned, he told the guests not to worry. Our mathematical society will do its best to find an explanation. He thanked Blair for his insight and added that he had work to attend to and had to leave. Gritting his teeth, he said, I hope you enjoy your evening at the estate. Blair thanked him in return. I also wish you a pleasant evening. He thought, even if the mathematical society tries to find an explanation, they won't succeed so easily. The Viscount left, leading his son with him, thinking that he had not expected this break to bring disgrace to their family. After that, Blair thanked the girl who had helped him and addressed her politely, calling her mistress. She asked, did you say Adam? Did you forget me? Are you really that callous? Suddenly Isella slapped Blair in the face and exclaimed, why are you opening your arms to strangers? Blair replied, I didn't do anything at all. What does that even mean, strangers? I didn't do anything to her either. The girl laughed and said, sorry for interrupting your moment. I was just joking. But you two have such a good relationship. I'm a bit jealous. Isabella exclaimed, who's flirting here? It's not what you think. She turned to the girl and asked, Alice, what are you doing here? Alice replied, didn't Britney's teacher tell you? I always participate in this event, but I see you here for the first time. Britney added, the Alice family is well known in the mathematics community in Yabo City. They've been participating in the workshop on behalf of their family for many years. Alice extended her hand to Blair. I'll introduce myself. My name is Alice. I'm in my 3rd year at Shandon NASA Academy, Isabella's classmate. I'm pleased to meet you. I hope my joke didn't offend you. Blair shook her hand in return. Alice leaned in close, examining him. Blair's gaze accidentally dropped to her chest. She smiled and said, you performed excellently today. It's the first time I've seen the Howard family turn from arrogant and pompous to so pathetic. Can we study mathematics together in more depth? Blair apologized and politely declined. You should ask the teacher for advice. I learned a lot from her. Alice smiled and said, you're not that easy to figure out, are you? I'll say goodbye for now. But when no one's around, let's chat some more. Blair said goodbye and Isabella, clearly annoyed, asked, what do you mean when no one's around, let's chat? Britney also said goodbye to Alice. Isabella turned to Blair and said, you immediately forgot everything, didn't you? I see you don't mind going off with her. Blair turned to her and asked calmly, why should I go with her? Isabella pointed her finger at him and exclaimed, you're all the same. The moment you see a beautiful girl, you run after her. Blair scratched his nose and asked, could she compare to you? Isabella blushed. Maybe, and you think I'm prettier. Blair confirmed with a nod. She grew even more embarrassed, thinking, what a fool. But if he meant my face, not my figure, then, that sounds nice. Suddenly Calvin approached them and greeted them. Britney smiled at him and asked, what are you doing here? Calvin replied, I'm the main character of the evening. I couldn't possibly miss this. Absolutely. Here's your paragraph with correct grammar, punctuation and sentence structure. I've also made small improvements for clarity and flow while keeping your original style and tone intact. Calvin replied, the problem you solved and the number you mentioned are not simple at all. The Howard family considered the riddle of the 7 bridges to be their pride. Today, you said that this riddle has no solution. This has led to the Howard family's position in the mathematical society being in great doubt. And as for the number you spoke of, the mathematical society solves complex problems using numbers, but now they cannot even find a single segment using this one. Can this number really be found? If not, then the entire society, no, even the whole world of mathematics will be shaken. So I want to ask you, who are you? Why did such talent suddenly appear only now? What is your goal? Blair smiled and asked, what are you talking about? Everyone saw how Phage asked me to solve a problem. I just had an idea and voiced it. As for that number, it's pure curiosity. And didn't Howard say he would definitely find this number together with the Mathematical Society? Calvin agreed and said that he must have imagined it. He told Blair not to worry, their society is always on the side of truth. But he warned Blair to be careful with the Howard family. He feared that Blair should not try to compete with them. Meanwhile, the Viscount sat on a chair in front of his beaten son who was lying on the floor. Phage was breathing heavily from the blows he had just received. The Viscount's subordinate said that everything was ready, they could begin. The Viscount replied that they would wait until he left the estate, just like before. He told his subordinate to make it look like an accident. No one should see it. His subordinate bowed to him. Suddenly, the Viscount's second son spoke up, saying that he was killing again. The blond young man stood behind his father and smiled. The Viscount turned around and, calling him Abel, asked, is it you again? The Viscount's subordinate looked at Abel in surprise and said, this is impossible, I did it with my own hands. Abel came closer and said, your surprise is normal. After all, I myself ordered it just like this time. Abel approached Phage and the Viscount, jumping up from his chair, asked, why didn't you die? Why did you appear again? Is this Blair your man? Abel said, you're so cruel. What a terrible example you set for your son. The Viscount pulled out a revolver and told him to answer the question. Phage looked at his brother in surprise. Abel replied, you're asking too many questions. I don't even know where to start. He stood up and continued, fine, I'll tell you. That young man named Blair is not related to me in any way, but I had an excellent reason to return. What will I do? Abel said, I'll tell you. I'm going to completely change the Howard family. The Viscount asked again, you're going to change our family? Abel confirmed and asked, what do you think is the basis of our family? The Viscount replied, of course, glory. Abel shook his head. No, it's a hoax. The Viscount asked, in what sense? Abel smiled and asked, isn't it obvious? You know it yourself. The bridge problem couldn't be solved. Neither could that number. But to protect the glories of our family, and in the name of the Mathematical Society, you chose to hide the truth. All these years, whenever someone tried to reveal it, you got rid of them, by any means necessary. Even me. Your own son wasn't an exception. Enough, the Viscount shouted. He pointed the revolver at Abel again and said, for the sake of our family, I will kill you again. Abel replied, you've already crossed the line. Do you remember what I told you? The truth cannot be hidden forever. One day, someone will discover it, and destroy this family built on lies. That someone is Blair. He's already revealed the truth to the mathematicians of Yabo City. Sure, you can try to deal with him, kill him even, but can you really silence all the witnesses? He grabbed the barrel of the revolver and pointed it straight at his chest. Then he said, if you can't do that, then tomorrow the truth will be known throughout the entire state. Your family name will be destroyed and everything in the Mathematical Society will be turned upside down. The Viscount's hand trembled. Abel asked, can you still support the existence of this family? The Viscount let go of the revolver and asked weakly, then what should I do? Abel smiled and replied, I will become the head of the family in your place. I will change our ways, and the Howard name will live on. He placed a hand on his father's shoulder and said, you know this, no one else can save this family but me. The Viscount remained silent. Then Abel leaned in and whispered something into his ear. A few days later at Blair's house he woke up to the sound of his alarm. He thought to himself how comfortable the bed was. There was none of that terrible smell like in the closet he used to sleep in. He stepped out of his room, said good morning, and noticed a huge stack of papers on the table. He was very surprised. Looks like she's been looking for the number all night again, he thought. After the seminar, news of the theory of the unsolvable problem spread throughout the mathematical community. Across the country, the reputation of the Howard family began to be seriously questioned, but in comparison with the unsolvable problem of the 7 bridges, the number that no one could find became the real focus. It was now being called the devil's number in the mathematical community. What a cool name. Almost all mathematicians in the society began trying to find the devil's number, but no matter how hard they tried, nothing came of it. This is understandable. Mathematics in this world has not yet reached the level where it is possible to express physical values, and physics is a completely new field for them. Even so, scientists in this world are highly respected. They continue their search, even into the dead of night. He believes that someday, they will be able to find the answer. Now it's as if they've found themselves in another reality. Even if they make many mistakes, in the end they will reach the truth. He sat down at the table and began to read the newspaper. On the first page he noticed the news that the head of the Howard family had changed. Will the new head be able to solve the Mathematical Society's crisis? Blair wondered. He thought that leaving the Mathematical Society would be the best decision for the Howard family. But why would they take such radical measures? This new head seems to be out of his mind. And what is this new chapter? Britney approached him and wished him good morning. Blair wished her the same in return and saw that she was standing in front of him in a nightie. She came up and asked if she hadn't asked him to wake her up when he got up. Blair replied that he forgot. Britney pointed her finger at his cheek and said he was a naughty boy. He says this every time. And about that number, she knows he knows something, but he doesn't say it. Blair blushed and asked her to stop teasing him. His nose began to bleed, and Britney suddenly thought, is he bleeding? What am I wearing? She realized she was standing in front of him in a nightie and screamed, calling him a pervert. A loud bang followed, and Blair's face now bore a red mark from her palm. After that, Blair began preparing breakfast while Britney changed clothes. She looked at him guiltily, apologized, and asked if it still hurt. She said she did it subconsciously. Blair said he had noticed that when she first wakes up she's a completely different person. She pulled her hair into a ponytail, and asked if he didn't like her this morning. Blair disagreed and replied that he liked her even when she had just woken up, even in her usual state. As he added seasoning to the dish, Britney was very surprised and then thanked him. While breaking an egg into the frying pan, he thought that now he had definitely said everything correctly. She asked what he was cooking. Why are you frying eggs and red fruits that can be eaten raw together? Blair replied that he was making an omelet with tomatoes. She asked again, omelet with tomatoes? He put the breakfast on a plate and explained that tomatoes is the name given to those red fruits in his hometown. Almost everyone there knows how to cook an omelet with tomatoes. He thought to himself that this had been all he'd been eating lately. After that he left the house and said, it's ready. Try it. I'm heading to class. She asked him to wait, then walked over and started wiping crumbs off his clothes. Blair looked at her in surprise. She said that everything was fine now, and told him to be careful. Blair left, and Britney went back into the house. She looked at the omelet and thought it looked strange. Is this really edible? She tried the omelet, and was very surprised, thinking, I've never tasted anything like this. The tomatoes are so sweet. What bliss! It's incredibly delicious. After a while, Blair reached the academy. His stomach began to growl, and he thought that while cooking he had completely forgotten about himself. He hadn't even eaten. Soon girls crowded into the lecture hall. One of them asked her friend, did you read the school newspaper? The head of the Howard family has changed. He ordered the dissolution of the Mathematical Society. Her friend replied, of course I read it. They say the new head is young and handsome. He's very mysterious. Their third friend said with a smile, who's truly mysterious is the man who spoke about the 7 bridges of the royal capital, mentioned the devil's number, and then disappeared without a trace. The friend wanted to ask, who was that man? But the other replied, my uncle from the Mathematical Society said he was about the same age as us. He asked to keep his name a secret. But how is that possible? She said. He shocked the whole world with just one word and he's our age. I don't believe it. What if he's just a secretive old guy? Meanwhile, Blair was sitting nearby at a desk and Isabella stood next to him. She turned to him and asked if he was listening to what she was saying. She asked him if he really didn't know how to find the number. Blair replied, I told you I don't know anything. Isabella exclaimed, that can't be true. You're definitely hiding something. Suddenly, Alice entered the hall and asked Isabella if she was bothering Blair again. She greeted Blair with a good morning and then blew him a kiss. Isabella asked, aren't you in your 3rd year? Why are you here? And why is Blair yours? Blair greeted Alice with a good morning, and his classmates perked up. They looked at the girls and one of them said, those are the most beautiful girls of the 3rd year, Isabella and Alice. Another guy said, They came for Blair. How did this guy get so lucky? Is he really that popular among girls? Jasmine noticed them, and Alice leaned over to Blair and asked what they were. Talking about that, suddenly Blair's stomach growled with hunger and he awkwardly looked away. He apologized to them and Alice left. Isabella looked at Blair, displeased, and asked, "Is he a pig? It's not even lunchtime yet." Suddenly Alice handed Blair a bun and said that she had accidentally taken an extra portion today. Would he help her eat it? Blair looked at the delicious bun with sparkling eyes and agreed, saying that she was a good person. But suddenly Isabella pinched his cheek and told him not to do it. "How can you accept food from someone else?" Blair replied that he wanted to refuse, but the bun smelled so good. Isabella got angry and asked, "If you were hungry, why didn't you ask me?" In response, he asked, "Weren't you the one who just called me a pig?" Isabella exclaimed, "That doesn't matter. It's your fault I said that. I came first." Alice told Isabella that Blair is a genius. It's only natural she sympathizes with him and wants to help. Isabella gritted her teeth in irritation, then handed Blair her food and told him to take it. She also took an extra portion. "Give her bun back and take mine instead." Blair looked at the sandwich and agreed. Alice asked, "Why do you get to decide for Blair? As far as I know, he's not in an official relationship with you." Isabella got really angry and told Blair to choose, would he take her sandwich or Alice's bun. He could only choose one. Alice said it didn't matter what he chose as long as he liked it. Blair thought that he just wanted to eat in peace. Sparks began to fly between Alice and Isabella, and Blair smiled awkwardly. Blair chose the sandwich and thanked Isabella. She was happy and said that meant he liked her sandwich better. Suddenly Blair stuffed both the bun and the sandwich into his mouth at once, and his cheeks puffed out. He swallowed with difficulty and said that both the sandwich and bun were delicious, thanks to both of them. Everyone looked at Blair in shock. Isabella said the sandwich must have been really tasty, if he gobbled it up so quickly. Alice noticed remnants of cream on Blair's cheek, wiped it with her finger, then licked it and said, "You left this here, you're so sloppy." She kept licking her fingers, saying that her bun was so delicious. Isabella exclaimed, "What does that even mean?" Suddenly the bell rang, and Alice said it was time for them to go to class. She said goodbye to Blair and told him to study well. Blair said goodbye to her, and then Isabella pointed her finger at him and said, "She's gone. You better wait for me in the classroom after class." She left the room, slamming the door loudly. Blair sighed in relief, thinking that they had finally left. Suddenly, his friend pinched his cheek and asked when he had time to meet Alice. Blair replied that it was a few days ago in the evening. Toby exclaimed, "In the evening?" Blair asked what he was getting at. "A few days ago, Britney's teacher took him to a mathematical society seminar where he met Alice." Toby asked, "You were at that seminar a few days ago? Is that where they started talking about the number of the devil?" Blair ignored him and said that Britney's teacher had arrived afterward. Then Blair went to the board and started writing a problem. Britney said they could try different methods of solving it. "The most common method is this. Now let's divide into groups and try to solve the problem on the board." She nudged Blair with her elbow and quietly called out to him. He turned around and saw that she was handing him bread. She said, "You forgot to eat breakfast again. This is for you. Eat." Blair looked at the bread and thought that he had been given bread again. After that, he joined the group. Toby asked where he got the bread from. Blair replied that it would take too long to explain. It was better to focus on the problem. Suddenly, a girl from their group jumped up from her chair and told Blair, "Toby said you participated in a mathematical society seminar. Then you must have seen that mysterious man. The newspaper says that, during the seminar, he solved the problem of the 7 bridges of the royal capital and talked about the number of the devil." Blair glanced sideways at Toby and asked, "Is this true? You told her what you saw?" The girl tilted her head to the side and asked, "Can you tell us anything?" Jasmine looked at Blair suspiciously. He said that when the mysterious man appeared, he had just stepped out for a moment, and by the time he returned, the man had already talked about the number of the devil. There were so many people there, he didn't see him. The girl asked, "So you missed the most important moment?" Blair replied that he had eaten too much, and his stomach hurt. There was silence between them. Toby said, "Your stomach hurt at such an important moment? You didn't take advantage of the opportunity." The girl asked what he meant, but in any case, Blair had the chance to participate in a mathematical society seminar. The most important people in the city of Yabo gather there. If you meet even a few of them, That's already amazing. She smiled and asked Blair if he had any free time. Maybe they could do math together. I have so many questions. I also have a very big house. If we get tired, we can sleep there. Toby asked, "Is this how you want to study math?" He exposed her. The girl exclaimed, "Shouldn't. She studied mathematics." All this time Jasmine was silent, scrolling through suspicions in her head. After finishing class, Blair went out into the corridor and said that it was good he was fast. Otherwise, Isabella would have caught him again. These girls were still annoying. He'd better practice magic, that was more important. He needed to keep his magic at a good level. Suddenly, someone asked when he had become so interested in magic. He turned and saw a hooded figure in front of him. The figure put a weapon to his throat, and Blair asked who it was. In front of him stood Jasmine, hiding her face under the hood. She told him not to twitch. The dagger was very sharp. Blair raised his hands and asked what she was doing. She said that, if she wasn't mistaken, it was he who had spoken about the 7 bridges of the royal capital, and the number of the devil at the seminar. His skills in both magic and mathematics had grown rapidly. He wasn't Blair. Blair never had such talent. Let him say, who is he, really? Why is he pretending to be Blair? Blair replied that there were too many questions and he didn't know where to start. But first, he was Blair. He thought it best not to mention the fact that he had moved, at least not yet. Jasmine exclaimed, "What nonsense is this? Do you think you've disguised yourself so well?" She began pulling his cheeks in different directions and said that any mask could be removed. But suddenly she was shocked there was no mask. She began to wonder if she was somehow failing. Blair kicked her lightly in the leg and she began to fall, closing her eyes. But instead of hitting the ground, she felt herself being held. She opened her eyes and saw that Blair had caught her. She blushed slightly, and they made eye contact. Then she exclaimed, "What are you doing? Let me go." Blair replied that he could let her go, but she shouldn't put a knife to his neck again. He showed her the spoon she had used as a weapon and said that one careless move and he could have bled. He told her, "You're convinced I'm not wearing a mask, so just believe that I'm Blair." She turned away and told him to let her go. She pulled away from him and asked, "Even if you're not hiding anything, why did you suddenly become so good at magic and mathematics, and your manner of speaking has changed too?" Blair replied that it was a long story. "I am Blair, but at the same time, I'm not. In fact, I slept for a long time, and when I woke up, I became like this." He told her he came from a world where there was no magic, but science was well developed. People there didn't know how to use magic. To them, magic was just fiction. But in that world, science was so advanced it surpassed even magic. With the help of technology, people could do things impossible even with magic. They had explored distant worlds in the universe and could even fly to other planets. "In that world, I was just an ordinary math teacher," he said. "So I can use mathematical knowledge no one here has even heard of." Suddenly, in his imagination, Jasmine raised her hand and called out to the teacher. Chan Luo asked what her question was. She asked, "Can they really cross the sky? Are there really other planets out there?" He replied that it was an excellent question. Of course, the sky can be crossed. And yes, besides our planet, there are countless others in space. Jasmine thanked him for the answer and asked why he suddenly looked so serious. Blair snapped out of the fantasy, finished his story and apologized to Jasmine, saying he might have said too much. He cleared his throat and added, "Eventually, I woke up in a world where I became a mathematical genius and a skilled magician, but unfortunately I lost some of my memories." All this time Jasmine had listened carefully. She thought for a moment, and Blair said, "That's how things are." Jasmine smiled and said, "Apparently you really are Blair. Just like before, you still love telling tall tales." Blair asked, "Have I said something like this before?" Jasmine nodded. "You always liked science more than magic. You even said you wanted to live in a world where there was no magic. That was probably because you weren't doing well with magic back then. You even cried in your sleep. So if this is due to memory loss, don't worry. I'll help you get your memories back too." Blair took her hand and said, "You care about me so much. I'm grateful." Jasmine saw what he did and quickly said, "I only agreed to help you get your memories back. Don't read into it." Blair asked, "What could I possibly think?" Time passed. Blair returned to the academy and looked at his hands. Suddenly someone grabbed him from behind and hugged him tightly. Blair realized it was Toby. He asked, "What are you doing? Let me go." Toby sat down and asked why he had grabbed it. Blair stuck 2 fingers into his nostrils, and then Phage appeared in front of him. Toby was surprised by his presence and immediately covered Blair protectively. He asked Phage what he needed. Phage said nothing. Then he bowed his head and asked Blair for forgiveness. He said, "I was wrong. I, Phage Howard, sincerely ask for your forgiveness. Please forgive me." Blair was surprised. Other students began to gather around them. Someone asked, "Is that Phage? What's going on?" Blair looked at Phage, puzzled, and asked, "Are you really asking for forgiveness?" The surrounding students whispered quietly among themselves. Did Elder Phage apologize to someone? What did this Blair do now? Things were unstable in the Howard family, but why did the headman suddenly come to apologize to him? Phage handed over a decorated piece of paper. Blair asked, "What is this?" Phage replied that it was passed on by his older brother, who had now become the head of the Howard family. His name was Abel. He conveyed this invitation. Tonight he would gather all the mathematicians in the kingdom for a conference. He wanted to address the topic of the Howard family's reputation at this conference. Phage bowed and asked Blair not to be angry with him. He apologized for his rudeness and asked Blair to take part. Toby whispered quietly, "You don't need to go there. Why did he suddenly talk to you like that? This is definitely some kind of trap." Blair looked at the invitation and began to think about it. Sometime later, many people had gathered at the Howard family's estate and were speaking with one another. Blair also went along and muttered that, in the end, he couldn't stay out of it, so he came. He wondered how the new head, Abel, was going to handle the situation. Suddenly, someone grabbed his ear. He felt a familiar sensation. Isabella said, "I knew you would come. And where did you go this afternoon?" "I told you to wait for me in the classroom after class." Britney was also surprised to see him. She said that she had searched for him all over the academy. Blair asked the teacher if she had also received an invitation. She replied that the news of the conference at the Howard estate had already spread among all the mathematicians in the kingdom. Almost all the city's mathematicians were there. Some had even come from other regions, but no one else had received any official invitation. Blair thought this was strange. Was he the only one who had received a personal invitation? Someone gently touched his ear. Alice asked what had happened to it. "Is it all because of her? I can massage your ear," she offered. Isabella jumped in. "What are you doing here?" "I just grabbed his ear. It didn't hurt, right?" Alice said. "But he's all red. That means it did hurt." Blair thought to himself, "They're both here again." Britney moved ahead and told them they should go, because the conference was about to start. They followed the teacher and walked on. Blair looked ahead and noticed that the image of the 7 bridges of the royal capital had already been taken. Britney asked how Abel would manage to resolve the situation. Blair asked the teacher if she knew him. She replied that they were classmates. He once wanted to become a teacher at the academy, but 3 years ago, he suddenly disappeared. She had been very surprised to learn just a few days ago that he had become the new head of the Howard family. Blair asked, what kind of person was Abel? Britney hesitated, unsure how to explain. All he ever thought about was math. Meanwhile, Abel sat at a desk in his office, looking over papers. Phage approached and told his brother that everyone had already gathered and was waiting for him. Abel asked, "Have you ever fallen in love? Anticipation only increases the passion on a date. By the way, did that guy come?" Foles replied, "There are a lot of people there. I'm not sure if Blair came, but I did everything I could." Abel placed a hand on Phage's shoulder and said, "You can relax. You're not our father. You don't need to be afraid of me." Then he stood up and said, "It's time for a new era for the Howard family." Back in the hall, people were speaking among themselves. One of the guests turned and exclaimed, "He's come." Foles followed Abel down the hall. People were surprised. He was very young. Abel greeted the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm honored to have you attend this event." He bowed politely. "My name is Abel Howard, and I now represent my family." Abel pulled out a book and said, "You've all been waiting for this. I'm sure you're eager to get to the main topic. But first, let me tell you about my family's past." Blair looked at the book in Abel's hand and wondered what it was. Abel said, This is the notebook of the elder of my family, the first generation. This book contains the whole truth our family has been hiding. Like many scientists of his time, our ancestor went to the 7 bridges to try to solve the problem. He spent a long time there, but couldn't find the answer. But the elder wasn't one to give up. One day he finally believed he had discovered the right path. Excited by his breakthrough, he immediately shared it with other scientists. On the morning of the second day, he presented the solution he thought he had found. He was so thrilled he didn't even stop to doubt himself. However, that night he decided to double-check his theory and realized he had made a huge mistake. He hadn't found the correct solution at all. He had simply taken a wrong turn in his reasoning. The elder realized the magnitude of his error. By morning he would be disgraced in front of everyone. Unable to bear the shame, he decided to throw himself into the river. With his death he sought to atone for his failure. He left behind his notebook in which he described everything in detail, what happened to him. In his note he called on his descendants to reveal the truth to the people. But the elder did not expect that his descendants would not fulfill his wishes. They hid the truth instead. They decided to conceal the book and tell people that the elder had found a solution, but the evidence had drowned in the river. All of this was done in order to preserve the family's honor right up to this very day. But the truth cannot be hidden forever. The Howard family must now face it. Having finished his story, Abel bowed to everyone present. Phage tried to say something to his brother, but Abel continued, saying that, on behalf of the Howard family, he would like to apologize to everyone for hiding the truth for so many years. People were surprised and asked, "Is this true? So this is how it was? The Howard family hid it for so long." Blair thought, "This guy is pretty determined." After it became clear that the problem of the 7 bridges of the royal capital had no solution, it was obvious that the Howard family had been lying. Now that he has revealed the truth, future generations will bear even greater responsibility. And for an elder from the first generation, the name Howard will become a shameful stigma. A girl asked, "Does that mean he dissolved the mathematical society to atone for the lie?" Abel replied, "Of course that was one of the reasons for dissolving the mathematical society, but it's not the main reason. The most important reason is the number of the devil." The girl asked, "So he never found the devil's number?" Abel agreed and said that he hadn't found it yet, not because of limited capability but because that number doesn't exist. People asked, "In what sense does it not exist?" Abel explained, "Roughly speaking, this number does not exist in the system of knowledge we currently have. That's why I dissolved the mathematical society. We no longer have the right to claim that everything in the world can be measured by numbers." A young man asked, "So, we can't solve the riddle of the devil's number?" Abel responded, "That's not true. The devil's number can be guessed, and one day we will succeed. It's just that right now this is a completely new field of research. And the one who can lead us into this new field is Mr. Blair from the Shandon NASA Academy, the one who originally proposed the idea of the devil's number." People began whispering to each other, "Who is this? This must be the young man who came up with the theory." They didn't think it was him. She was at the seminar when he first brought it up. Abel said, "Many of you probably don't know his name. That's because he's very modest. When he introduced the devil's number at a meeting a few days ago, he asked that his name not be made public. But now, to step past this obstacle and enter a new field, I must ask this gentleman to help us." Britney asked, "What should we do?" They suddenly noticed that he had already disappeared. "Where did he go?" someone asked. Phage turned to his brother and said, "He's not here." Abel replied, "I thought his curiosity would get the better of him, and he'd come. But it seems I was mistaken. Sooner or later, he will appear." Sometime later at the academy, students were buzzing with excitement. "Did you hear the latest news? Everyone's going crazy. They say the person who proposed the devil's number was Blair." She heard it too, and now everyone's urging him to find the number. Blair thought to himself, "That Abel guy, he dumped it all on me. Now no one cares about the Howard family's scandal. They only care about the devil's number." Toby pointed a finger at Blair and called out to him. Blair noticed and said, "I already told you I left once I realized things were getting too intense. I haven't seen the rest, so don't ask me." Toby tried to say something else, pointing again. Blair looked where he pointed and saw a history teacher, Mr. Hank. The teacher said, "I know you're really good at math now, but what about my subject? You've never passed it." Blair replied, "I'll explain everything. It's just that my knowledge of history is a little tangled up right now." Hank slammed his hand on the table and said, You need to remember something. Even if you're famous now, you're still a student. You must pay attention to your studies. Don't get arrogant. Toby suddenly interrupted. Sir, someone's come for Blair. Hank, irritated, snapped. Can't you see I'm talking to him right now? Toby panicked, trying to explain who it was. But Hank shouted again. I said I'm talking to him. Nobody cares who it is, not even if it's the deputy director. Got it? Just then, Calvin grabbed Hank by the shoulder and said, I came for Blair. Hank froze in panic when he saw the vice principal. Why didn't anyone say anything? He shouldn't be kept waiting. Sometime later, in the corridor, Calvin extended his hand and said, We meet again. Blair looked over and asked, Chairman Archie, you came to me. Is this about the devil's number? Calvin replied, The whole world is asking you to solve the riddle of the devil's number. Our mathematical society in Yabo City is also under pressure. We hope you can help. Blair thought about it silently. Archie added, We really need your help. Calvin nodded and said, This won't be a mistake for you, Blair. Blair paused, then said, I don't want to do this. Sometime later, Toby opened the door to the office. Britney, surprised to see him, asked what had happened to him. He replied that the teacher told her to go quickly. Blair was taken away, and at the same time in the meeting room many people had gathered at the entrance. A large number of individuals in magical robes were in the crowd, all staring at Blair. Someone whispered, There are 4 deputy directors here. He understood everything. This student was a real talent, and he was also their pupil. Blair noticed, There are also more than 10 managers standing outside the door. Do they want to pressure me into agreeing? Calvin said. You came up with the devil's number. You can't let down the entire mathematical community. Blair asked, Do you always call truth something diabolical? A man with long hair stepped forward and asked, Boy, do you even know who we are? Calvin held his hand out in front of them and asked, Is it true that the devil's number really can't be expressed as a whole number? Blair replied, There's more to it than that. You won't be able to express its square with the number 2 or with the number 3 and 52. This value cannot be expressed as an integer, and there are many such numbers. Furthermore, this can be proven using mathematics. That's all I can tell you right now. Archie asked, So you mean we've been wrong for hundreds of years? Blair said, That's normal. Mathematics is a science where we constantly make mistakes. Isn't that right? If you find a proof, establish a new type of number and expand the number field, then you can move forward. Calvin said, I know the method of proving and formulating such a number. You must help us for the sake of the entire mathematical community. Blair apologized and said, I can't help with this. I understand what you're afraid of. You're afraid that the truth you've believed in for hundreds of years might be wrong. You're afraid you're going down the wrong path. Fear is normal. In my homeland, entire wars were waged in pursuit of truth. Only when fear is unknown to us can we move forward and find the truth. You need to fight the devil, step by step, overcoming your own mistakes. If I tell you everything directly now, it will only harm the mathematical world. He continued, I believe you can muster the courage to look fear in the eye. Only then will you overcome this difficulty. After all, people have always celebrated courage. Calvin was surprised by his words that people have always praised courage. Suddenly everyone bowed to Blair. You're right, they said. We moved too quickly. We're grateful to you for your guidance. The mathematical community will never forget your contribution. Blair replied, You don't need to say that. Unexpectedly, someone broke down the door to the office, throwing in a man who flew across the room and crashed into the wall. Everyone was stunned. They all turned toward the doorway. Britney appeared, using air magic to create powerful currents. In a menacing voice, she demanded, Why did you take Blair? Blair raised his hand and said to the teacher, I'm here, I'm fine, they just wanted to talk. Britney was extremely embarrassed when she heard him. She apologized to the chairman and started to explain herself. Calvin said, I understand everything. This student is a real talent, and he's also your student. We went too far without even warning you. Britney still felt guilty and didn't know what to say. Sometime later, she was walking down the corridor with Blair. She turned to him and said, As soon as Toby told me you were taken, I was afraid they would do something to you. Blair replied, You don't have to worry. Nothing will happen to me. Besides, there are so many students at the academy they wouldn't be able to do anything to me. Britney said, By the way, I have one question for you. Blair asked, What is it? She asked, Why did you stir up such a fuss about the devil's number? Blair said, "Weren't you there then?" As is expected in a mathematical society, I simply asked them a counter question. I didn't expect the question to be so complex that it would be called devilish. Britney responded, "That's not true. Do you like Isella?" Blair was surprised by her question. In Britney's mind, she imagined that Phage had been talking to Isella, and Blair decided to compete with him for her. Britney grabbed Blair by the shoulders and said, "You did a side maneuver and that's cool. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. In fact, I'll support you." Blair said, "That's not true. You should listen to me." But Britney ran off, saying, "After studying, you must return home immediately. I still have lessons, so I have to go." Blair called out, "Wait," but realized she wasn't going to listen. He was stunned. Later that evening, he was cooking food on the stove, thinking, "I didn't expect the teacher to have such an imagination. I need to find time to explain everything to her." Isella approached him and asked, "What are you doing? Are you cooking? It smells tasty." Blair was surprised by her appearance. Britney appeared and said, "I called her. She wants to study the devil's number with us. We haven't had dinner yet, so Isella will just taste your cooking with us." Blair asked the teacher, "Your magic element is wind, right?" Isella nodded and said, "Yes. The teacher is a high-level wind elemental mage." Blair said, "When I was buying groceries, I thought it would be nice to make a refrigerator, but that would require high-level water element magic." Britney asks, "What is a refrigerator?" The year says, "It's an ice chest for storing food." He hands her a piece of paper, which she takes. Isella comes up to her to look, and they both examine the drawing. Isella begins to laugh loudly and says that he is such a talented artist. Blair snatches the drawing and says he didn't ask her. "This is called a drawing," he says. She responds, "It looks like something a dog scratched with its paw." Britney starts using magic and asks, "Do you need this refrigerator?" She creates a refrigerator from energy and asks, "Is it supposed to be like this?" Blair touches it and says, "That's exactly what it is. How could you do this?" Britney replies, "As you see it, I also have water elemental magic, so it was easy for me." Isella asks, "How is this possible? The number of magicians who master two elements can be counted on one hand." Blair asks the teacher, "She is so talented in magic. Why did she stay at the academy?" Britney becomes a little sad and remains silent. She looks at the food cooking on the stove and says, "It looks like the food is ready." Blair runs to the stove and says he forgot to turn it off. After that, he places several dishes on the table. Isella says, "It smells good, but it looks rather strange. I've never seen anything like this." Britney says, "I used to find his food strange too, but it's actually very tasty. You must try it and find out." Blair says, "These are all recipes from my homeland. It's normal that you haven't tried them. Besides, I haven't invited you yet." Isella asks, "How can such an idiot cook deliciously? I would rather die of hunger than touch this strange food." After a while, they all ate. Isella blushed and thought it was very, very tasty. Blair notices this and says, "You said you'd rather starve?" She immediately grabs his ear and pulls. "It's not my fault. It's all because you cooked it too tasty." He yells, "I'm in pain." Britney laughs watching them. They both notice and ask the teacher what's wrong with her. She calms down a little and says, "I just thought you two make a great couple." They both blush upon hearing this. Isella lets him go and says, "Who would even want to date this idiot?" Blair asks, "Who would want to date such an arrogant person?" Britney says she will be moving up to entry level soon. She asks, "What element do you want to practice?" Isella says she plans to choose the wind element like Britney. Britney says although the wind element is quite strong, it won't help much in battle until you reach a high level. Besides, the most important thing for a girl is self-defense. You might want to consider the earth element. It has the greatest protective power. Isella says she doesn't want to because earth element magicians have too scary outfits. Blair thinks that's a really good reason. Isella grabs him by the ears and begins to pull. He turns to her and says, "I didn't even say anything." She replies, "You definitely thought badly of me. I can tell just by your glance." Britney asks him, "Which element will you choose?" Blair reflects and says, "As a child, I decided I liked all the elements." Isella grins and says, "Keep dreaming. Do you really think you're so talented you can master all four elements?" Britney thinks for a moment and says maybe he can do it. Isella is surprised and says, "He just says whatever he wants. Why are you agreeing with him too?" Britney doesn't let her finish and says, when he casts a spell, a very chaotic and dense aura immediately forms around him. Perhaps he could actually control 4 elements at once. She stands up and says, we'll talk about it later. When the time comes, you'll know which element to choose. Although you're here to study mathematics, I can also help you with magic. They both say, that's cool. Britney says, however, if you want to become great magicians, you can't rely only on magic. Although the gods granted us the ability to perform magic, the existence of spells and gestures means magicians spend a lot of time activating their powers. To compensate for this, mages need to train in martial arts to be able to fend for themselves when there's not enough time to activate magic. Blair thinks, with magic, you don't have to waste energy on washing dishes. It's very convenient. Britney says, martial arts are often much more useful than magic. I hope someday you'll become familiar with them. So before I teach you magic, I'd like to show you martial arts as well. Blair wonders if the teacher really knows martial arts. Isella tells the teacher that she has already studied martial arts at home. Can she show her? Let him see what it is. Britney agrees and tells him to be careful. Isella says, you don't have to worry, I won't be using all my power. Even though he's better than me in magic and mathematics, I will definitely defeat him in martial arts. Sometime later, they gathered in the hall and changed their clothes. Isella says, very soon you'll be crying in front of me. She starts running toward him. She runs up to him quickly and before striking, warns him that she's about to attack. Blair manages to dodge the attack. She continues to strike but still can't reach her target. Blair grabs Isabella's hand, which greatly surprises her. He is able to pin her to the floor by holding her hand behind her back. She yells, idiot, let me go. Blair says he will let her go, but Isabella suddenly throws a kick. He manages to dodge and thinks it was a sneaky maneuver. With very fast movements, he spins, causing her to lose her balance. Realizing that she is going to fall, she opens her eyes slightly to find out what happened. Blair caught her and didn't let her hit the ground. He asks her for forgiveness and she blushes because of this. Britney asks, so, you studied martial arts? Blair replies, it's not that I studied it seriously, I'm just really interested in it. For some time back in my homeland, I practiced the art of sanda. Britney raises an eyebrow. Sanda? I've never heard of that before. Your homeland must be very mysterious. Blair becomes embarrassed, realizing that he's acting suspiciously. Isabella grabs him by the ear and says, idiot. How long are you going to hold me? Let me go now. He says, oh, sorry, I forgot about you. She lets him go and says that if the floor hadn't been so slippery, she definitely wouldn't have lost. Britney tells him, this Sanda technique sounds interesting. You should try to attack me. Blair hesitates. Sanda's power is difficult to control, he says, and nearly slips and says, Isabella instead of Sanda. Britney smiles, don't worry, just hit as hard as you can. He agrees and tells her to be careful. He begins to run toward her quickly. Britney prepares for his attack. Blair blushes and recalls that his Sanda trainer once told him, if you fight true masters, you won't even notice what happened to your body. He misses his attack, and Britney strikes the back of his head. Blair, lying on the floor, thinks, until now I didn't believe it, but now I do. She gently picks him up and places him on the floor. Isabella panics. Teacher, what happened to him? Is he okay? Britney turns to her and says, you seem very worried about him, but don't worry, he just lost consciousness for a while. He'll wake up soon. Isabella blushes. I don't care if this idiot wakes up. Britney asks teasingly, do you like Blair? Isabella is stunned and cries out in surprise. That's not true. At all. How could I like that idiot? You're definitely mistaken. Britney smiles. I don't think so, I'm sure of it, because I do too. She doesn't have time to finish because Blair, still half asleep, turns over and mutters, teacher. Isabella is surprised but quickly covers her mouth to stop herself from screaming. Blair starts to wake up. What happened? Later in class, Blair, wounded and bandaged, says, ugh, I'm in pain. Toby walks up and asks, what happened to you? You slept at the teacher's house and came back with injuries. Did you have a hot night? Blair groans. Shut up. I just fell. He thinks. It's all because of that cruel woman. That night, Isabella had grabbed his hand and pinned him to the floor. You just woke up, and you're already touching the teacher in front of me, idiot, she shouted. Blair cried, I'm in pain? You're going to break my arm? Britney tells her, let him go, he didn't do it on purpose. Blair thinks. Her technique is poor, but she's strong. She actually broke my arm. What surprised him even more was the teacher. She was really good at martial arts. She must have had a great mentor and spent a lot of time training. In this world, ordinary families don't get the opportunity to practice martial arts from childhood, let alone magic and mathematics. She really just a teacher? His thoughts are interrupted by Toby calling him. Hey, I've already mastered the technique of summoning two elements, the one you taught me? Blair is shocked. You really mastered it that quickly. Toby proudly says, of course I did. I'll show you the fire element of this world. Watch. He puts his hand forward and channels his energy, using the fireball technique. Blair watches for a moment. Why isn't anything happening?